Chapter 318. Luna looked at the blonde loli who suddenly appeared and was slightly stunned. She put down her tense hands and tried to use a gentle tone to say, "Little friend, it's very dangerous to be outside this late at night. Where's your family? Hey, big sister, can you send me home?" The blonde loli put on a stiff smile and cheerfully kicked her little boots as she approached Luna, who was on the road. "Where do I have the time?" Luna cursed in her mind, but her expression was still gentle and kind. If it was half a year ago, she wouldn't even bother with her and would use her mutant ability to suppress and intimidate people regardless of age or gender. But in the past half a year, after becoming Kale's secretary, her personality and way of dealing with people gradually changed. She had two different ways of dealing with enemies and normal people. Who told the boss not to like a one-track-minded violent maniac? When Luna thought about this, her tired and cold face showed a bit of blush. Her vigilance dropped a few more levels and she let the blonde loli jump up to her side. At this time, Eddie groaned in pain and opened his two eyes from unconsciousness. He fiercely struggled, but his four limbs and even his neck were locked by thick metal chains. It was impossible for a human to break free. "You still haven't given up resisting." Luna crossed her arms in front of her chest and was surprised at Eddie's stubbornness. "That symbiotic demon called Toxin has entered a dormant state. I'm the only one who still has some strength left. I'm not your opponent at all." Eddie helplessly panted and looked at Luna eagerly and said, "I'm really a good law-abiding citizen. It's all because of the symbiotic demon in my body that I'm able to reach this step." "Right, it seems to be a good symbiotic demon. At least it's on the opposite side of those alien symbiotic demons." He paused and begged, "This position is too uncomfortable. You should let me go first. I'll come down and explain to you slowly." "That won't do. We'll talk about it when K2 comes. I remember that you're very good at running." Luna coldly refused and took out her communication device to make a call. "Okay then." Eddie could only nod in agreement. When he looked up, he seemed to have seen something. His pupils contracted due to shock, and he subconsciously issued an urgent warning. "Beauty, be careful of your back." "What?" The communicator in her hand was connected. While Luna was surprised, she suddenly felt a strange feeling coming from behind her. There was also a subtle sound of wind breaking that suddenly sounded. Poochie. A black spike pierced through Luna's back, penetrating her slender body and coming out from under her towering breasts. Warm blood splattered everywhere, dyeing the road a few meters in front of her red. Luna's beautiful eyes were filled with disbelief. Even if her ability and stamina were almost exhausted, and her spirit and vigilance were not at their peak, with Kale's professional combat experience, there was no way she would not even know that the enemy had reached her back. She wanted to speak, but as soon as she opened her mouth, she spat out a mouthful of sticky blood. Sizzle. The spike was ruthlessly pulled out, causing Luna to fall backwards. Her eyes finally caught the enemy who had attacked her. It was the golden-haired loli who looked harmless. At this time, the golden-haired loli's white face was stained with blood. Her left arm had been wrapped by the black muscle symbiotic tissue, and the combat armor had transformed into a large and long spike. Blood kept dripping down along the spike, staining her cute goth skirt and white stockings. "Human, your weakness is still too obvious." Looking at Luna, who was lying in a pool of blood, the golden-haired loli sneered. Her hoarse voice had its own echo, which made people shiver in fear in the quiet night. Stepping on the pool of blood that had not yet dried, the golden-haired loli walked forward and stopped in front of Eddie, who was bound by metal. "Traitor and sinner of the race, you still don't dare to come out after killing Bailey?" The golden-haired loli raised her left arm and pressed the cold spike against Eddie's chest above his heart. Eddie raised his eyebrows slightly, and when he didn't know what to say, his pupils gradually turned black. The awakened toxin took over his body, and in a normal human state, he said coldly, "Your way of doing things is really disgusting. You gave up on choosing a strong human host, and instead used a weak young human as a parasite to launch a sneak attack. Correction, I am not of the same bloodline as your race. I was born on planet Sokka of the Banished Land. Planet Sokka, that alien garbage gathering place? You really are a bastard alien, the trash of trash. The golden-haired loli said disdainfully. Trash? Huh. Toxin laughed. In the eyes of the alien civilization, planet Sokka was naturally a large garbage dump in the universe. But only when one entered it would they know that it was very inclusive. Whether it was technology or racial evolution, it was far superior to other civilization star systems. Only the strong were qualified to break out of there. If you were on planet Sokka, in the interstellar duel arena, you would probably only last half a day. Toxin said indifferently. The golden-haired loli didn't know what the duel on planet Sokka meant, but she could still see the contempt, disgust, and coldness in Eddie's eyes. Congratulations, you've successfully pissed me off, you can just end your life here. Saying so, the golden-haired loli raised the spike, preparing to thoroughly chill Eddie and Toxin. At the moment of death, Eddie calmly said, unfortunately, you won't have the chance. The golden-haired loli suddenly had a bad feeling, and without hesitation, she stabbed the spike towards Eddie's heart. Now! Eddie shouted anxiously as he watched the spikes getting closer and closer. You don't need to tell me. Behind the golden-haired loli, Luna's weak but powerful voice came, and then the metal chains trembled slightly, unlocking the locks that connected Eddie's limbs. Eddie's body fell down, and he managed to avoid the sharp thorns that whizzed past his head, though it was a close call. At the same time, 4 to 5 chains moved forward along the spike, wrapping around the golden-haired loli's petite body. What's going on here? The golden-haired loli was a bit stunned, not yet able to react to this turn of events. She looked at the untied Eddie on the ground, and finally turned her head to look not far behind her. On the ground 10 meters away. Luna's delicate and cold face was pale, her body curled up in a pool of blood, her left hand clutching the huge hole in her chest, while her other hand was raised in a clenched position, a faint green mist lingering in between. A mere human, after suffering such heavy injuries, you're still not dead. The golden-haired loli said bitterly. It's all thanks to your reminder. Luna didn't pay attention to it, instead, she thanked Eddie who was also lying on the ground. At the moment of the attack, she still managed to avoid a fatal wound under her early warning, so not only was she not on the verge of death, she still had a certain amount of fighting power. Beautifully done. Eddie struggled to raise his thumb, and said with a smile, I told you, you and I are on the same side. Chapter 319. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Luna and Eddie were both humans. Even if they were enemies before, when the alien symbiotic entity appeared, they seemed to follow the same rules and reached a consensus in a short time. Do you think that with just the two of you, who are either heavily injured or exhausted, you will be able to fight against me? The blonde loli licked the blood at the corner of her lips. Her bloodshot eyes revealed a violent and cold emotion. Her slender fingers clenched into a fist. Don't you think you are underestimating me? The golden-haired loli roared as she was shackled by 4 or 5 metal chains. Her body swelled up like an inflated balloon, and a large amount of red liquid burst out from her skirt, wrapping around her immature and petite body. The liquid solidified at a speed visible to the naked eye, forming pieces of dark red tough muscles, an armed skeleton, and an extremely ugly red monster head. In a short while, the golden-haired loli transformed into a humanoid monster that was nearly 2 meters tall. Its tough skin was dark red like coagulated blood. Perhaps it was because the host was a young human female, but its body and muscles were much more slender than the venom. However, it was only a slim appearance. As a symbiotic entity, her strength would not be that weak. This is really not good. Toxin, are you still there? Half lying on the ground, Eddie looked at the transformed red symbiotic entity in panic. For a moment, he did not know what to do. He anxiously called out for Toxin in a low voice. However, Toxin, who was still there a moment ago, now seemed to have returned to a dormant state. Cough cough, lying on the ground, Luna could not stop coughing out blood. Her face was as calm as before. One of her hands was still in a grasping motion. She was trying her best to maintain the strong control of the metal chains. She was very clear that if the other party broke free, everyone here would die. You overestimate yourself. Oh right, I forgot to tell you. My name is Blood Prison. I am the powerful creature that will kill you. The red symbiotic entity sneered. Its thick arms and legs began to exert force and pull inward. Clang clang. The metal chain that glowed with a faint green light suddenly tightened. The lock and buckle could not withstand the abnormal force and gradually twisted. Bit by bit, they opened up with a crisp sound that sounded like they were about to break. Seeing that the chain was about to break, spots of green light quickly circled around it, and the metal cracks on the lock began to heal under the light. Interesting. Let's see how long you can last. Seeing this magical scene, Blood Prison looked as if he had seen the best prey. He wasn't afraid of wasting his abundant physical strength, and his four limbs continued to pull the thick and long chains enhanced by his ability. The competition between the mutated superpowers and the strange symbiotic power caused the battle to enter a temporary stalemate. Blood Prison was obviously confident in his victory. He calmly wore down Luna's energy, his fangs gnawing on the chain, causing sparks to fly. At most, I can only stall for time. I can't completely lock him down with my current weakened state. Sorry to disappoint you, boss. Luna sighed in her heart. She was still losing blood, and her physical strength was already exhausted. She couldn't hold on much longer with her willpower. You. Luna raised her eyes and suddenly looked at Eddie next to Blood Prison. She urged him in a weak and cold voice, "Why don't you leave now and wait for death? If I leave, what will you do?" Eddie struggled to get up. He was extremely annoyed. At the crucial moment, Toxin was silent again. Luna said calmly, "If one can leave, one is one. Anyway, you can't help. Go back and report this to the unnatural firm for me. Let Family Cow's family take revenge for me." She lay on the cold ground covered in blood. Her white and delicate face and dark green shoulder-length hair were all stained with tragic bright red blood. She looked at the fatal danger and death at this moment with indifference. Luna had always been like this. Her life was like a blade of grass that grew on the edge of a cliff. It was just that this blade of grass inadvertently saw the brilliant aurora and wanted to follow in the footsteps of the scorching sun, even if it was just a little bit closer. So beautiful. Eddie was stunned and muttered to himself at an inappropriate time. Toxin's voice suddenly appeared in his mind and urged him, "What are you standing there for? Hurry up and run. That woman is right. If you stay, 2 lives will be lost. You've recovered?" Eddie was like a drowning man grasping at the last straw. He begged in a low voice, "Can I change back to the armed state just now? Or, you can control my body as long as you take Luna out of here safely." He gritted his teeth and said with determination, "After that, I'll do whatever you want." "No." Toxin decisively refused and responded, "If I was in my peak state, I would be happy to make this deal. Unfortunately, I overdrew my strength just now. You and I can't beat it at all. Remember this feeling and come back for revenge tomorrow." Before Toxin could finish his words, he took the initiative to forcibly control Eddie's body. A black tentacle immediately ejected from his back, extending and sticking to a building dozens of meters behind him. It contracted like rubber and quickly pulled him away from the scene. "Toxin, don't. I'm begging you to take her with you." Eddie's voice resounded in the night sky of the highway. His voice was still echoing, but he had already disappeared. Only Luna and Blood Prison were left on the wide road. "What do you know? If I don't stay, how can you escape? As if responding to Eddie's words, Luna sighed like an old man. Her pale face relaxed and her empty hands sank down powerlessly. The green mist effect of her ability dimmed and disappeared. Crack. Without the support of her ability, several chains broke into countless pieces almost at the same time and fell to the ground with tinkling sounds. I really don't know what to do with you humans. You held on for so long just to let that one person escape? You think he can avenge you? Stepping on the metal fragments, Blood Prison broke free from his restraints like a demon from hell. He walked forward with elegant steps and raised his left hand to transform into a crescent scythe. What do you know? Luna shook her head and said firmly, after tonight, you'll definitely die, and you'll die very miserably. Blood Prison had heard a lot of threats from creatures. They were all curses before the death of their prey. But this time was different. Luna's threat seemed to be a fact that he was about to face, making him feel an inexplicable chill. It was as if he killed Luna, he would provoke a very terrifying existence. Indeed. Although he had only been on Earth for a day, the humans he met were stronger than the last. This was too strange. The reality was different from his expectations. Before this, you'll die. Blood Prison stabilized his state of mind and dragged the deformed scythe forward. Because the scythe was too big, the tip fell and touched the ground, creating a string of sparks. Luna had overdrawn her strength and could only watch the other approach. She gave up resisting and closed her eyes. Her beautiful face was expressionless. It's a pity that I can't see you again. Boss. Chapter 320. The bustling city during the day seemed incomparably cold and lonely at night. The numerous buildings were like huge steel tombstones. Perhaps someone had already noticed the fierce battle on the road, but unfortunately, no one dared to approach. The New York police maintained their habit of being late, and there was no trace of reinforcements. Lucy had really exhausted her physical and mental strength. Her life force was extremely weak. She fell on the colder and colder ground, quietly waiting for death to come. Raising the scythe, the humanoid and deformed Blood Prison was like an executioner. He didn't want any more accidents to happen, so he ruthlessly swung the scythe down after half a second of charging. In the rapid slash, the dark blood scythe cut through the air, making a cheerful and hurried sharp sound. Wrapped in air waves, it slashed towards the back of Luna's smooth and white neck. The moment before the scythe fell, the wall of a building not far away suddenly caved in. The air waves surged and shattered the glass of several floors. A dark shadow quickly swept across the low sky. Please, catch up for me. Under the urgent obsession, the black shadow stomped on the ground midway, and its speed soared to another level. It forcibly broke into the place where Blood Prison and Lucy were. Blood Prison turned his head in surprise and was just hit by the other party. Like Mars hitting Earth, the pure collision of the body had the effect of detonating a bomb. In the air filled with gravel and dust, Blood Prison dragged the scythe and flew out. It rolled a few times in a row and was thrown 20 meters away. It crashed into a green tree on the side of the road before stopping. Luna opened her eyes a little and looked up with difficulty. She vaguely saw the dark figure and the monster-like face of the demon. She subconsciously said in surprise, "Boss?" Huff, huff. "What boss, are you okay?" The humanoid monster gasped and said urgently with a trace of anxiety in his tone. "You are Eddie?" Luna closed her eyes and opened them again. Her dizzy brain gradually cleared up. After realizing that she had mistaken him for someone else, her cold face showed a disappointed expression. She sighed and said, "So it's you. Why did you come back?" Hey, I risked 2 lives to come back and save you. Don't think that I came back to give you my head," Eddie said. At the same time, under the state of the symbiotic poison armor, he firmly hugged Luna's slender waist with his thick dark arms. "Take your men and retreat. I can't maintain this form for long. Toxin shouted in Eddie's mind. I don't need you to tell me that. Besides, her injuries are too serious. We need to send her for treatment in time. Eddie stood up and was about to leave when a gust of wind blew over. He hurriedly raised his other hand to block it, focusing on protecting the half-conscious Luna in his arms. Chi! Blood Prison's transformed scythe chopped down on Eddie's arm. The sharp edge broke through the dark skin and sunk into most of his muscles and bones, almost cutting his arm in two. Eddie groaned in pain and took a few steps back. He grabbed the blade with his injured hand and hugged Luna with his other hand. I originally thought that it would be troublesome to let you go, but I didn't expect you to come back to court death. Blood Prison laughed wildly and stepped forward. He pressed Eddie's body with the scythe and continued to retreat endlessly. The blade of the scythe penetrated deep into the muscles of the symbiotic armor. Eddie was already exhausted, and now he had to carry a wounded person who he needed to ensure her safety. He struggled to hold on and instantly fell into a dangerous situation where he was brainlessly suppressed by the symbiotic demon. I told you to go, but now, let alone one life or two, even 3 lives will have to be left here, Luna said weakly. Letting a beauty like you stay and be killed, as a good citizen, I really can't do it. Eddie gritted his teeth and simply used both hands to protect Luna. He used his arms and body muscles as a shield to resist Blood Prison's powerful slashes again and again. At the same time, he kicked the ground with both feet, creating spiderweb-like cracks on the concrete pavement. He used the last of his strength to forcibly break through and escape. But before he could rush out 10 meters, Blood Prison closed in on Eddie's head like a ghost. The scythe left a deep wound on his back, and even the liquid of the symbiotic armor splashed out under this attack. Eddie and the symbiotic armor let out overlapping groans. He hugged Luna and fell onto the road, plowing out a tragic ditch more than 10 meters long on the ground. Eddie, my time is up. The symbiotic armor sighed in Eddie's mind. As if following its words, the symbiotic armor of darkness on Eddie's body gradually collapsed and turned into a viscous black linear liquid. The ugly monster mask fell off a bit, revealing half of Eddie's face. His face was pale as he gasped for breath. A large amount of sweat and the symbiotic armor of darkness merged together. Even so, he still protected Luna and didn't let her suffer any more injuries. Luna's lips opened and closed, firmly saying in a soft voice, Eddie, right? I've decided. From now on, you will be my, Luna's, good brother. Big sister, let's talk about it after we survive. Eddie squeezed out a stiff and ugly smile. He knelt powerlessly on the messy ground. A few meters in front of him, the symbiotic armor of darkness was approaching with its scythe. What, you're not running anymore? You dare to underestimate me? I'll chop off your heads and eat them. The symbiotic armor of darkness walked towards Eddie and Luna. But at this moment, dense and numerous footsteps came from the side of the road. This is... Eddie also looked around. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. 1, 2, 3, there were more than 5 teams of 3 people in a team. The people who rushed over were all dressed in black uniforms and wearing devil masks. However, the weapons on them were all different, ranging from advanced technology to extreme craftsmanship. There were all kinds of weapons. Their movements were vigorous and nimble as they surrounded the battlefield. Every one of them had a cold and indifferent aura. Their movements were flawless, as if they had rehearsed this countless times. Who are you? The symbiotic armor of darkness asked cautiously. The team members who rushed over didn't speak. They just stared coldly at the symbiotic armor of darkness. Soon, they separated to allow people to pass through. Behind them, a beautiful and elegant woman with black hair, black eyes, black dress, black stockings and black boots walked out. When she saw the severely injured Luna in Eddie's arms, her beautiful eyes flashed with an emotionless silver light. It's over. Luna whispered. She closed her eyes and fell into a deep coma. You're from the unnatural firm." Eddie recognized Yutong, who was the leader of the group, and shouted with joy. "Leave the rest to us." The Crimson One was a red-haired young man. He stared at the symbiotic armor of darkness and said in a domineering tone, "No need." Yutong suddenly shook her head and calmly ordered, "Crimson One, take your team and escort Luna back to her home for treatment. The rest of you stay here and wait for orders. As for the enemy, I'll deal with them." When the symbiotic armor of darkness heard this, their faces changed dramatically. Their hearts trembled. They knew that the Sentinel Yutong was really angry. Ever since she became Kale's assistant, Yutong rarely participated in battles. But the people of Family Cal all knew one fact. For half a century, ever since Logan and his mother left Earth, Yutong was the second most powerful person in Family Cal, whether it was strength or prestige. She was the strongest person after Kale. Chapter 321. The night was long, and there was no end to the dawn tonight. Regardless of the situation in New York, in the desolate outskirts between the temporary base of SHELD and Old Bridge Town in Mexico, the travel-worn caravan leaned against the bottom of a small mound. Kale, Jane, and the others came here to set up tents and camp. A bonfire was lit between the caravan and the tents. The light of the fire dispelled some of the thick darkness and bone-chilling coldness. Other than Kale, who maintained his usual gentle calmness, the others looked defeated and lucky. Especially Thor, who had lost his divine power and hammer. After Eric brought him out of the prison cell in the temporary base of SHELD, in the name of the old astronomer, his eyes lost their bright luster. He sat alone on a rock on the mound far away from the bonfire and looked up at the dark blue night sky that was dotted with stars. "Buddy, only you can get through this by yourself. I can't do anything about it." Kale glanced at Thor in the distance and withdrew his gaze with a sigh. Leaning against the bonfire surrounded by rocks, he rolled up his sleeves and skillfully spread the barbecue grill. He placed the chicken wings that Jane and Daisy had cleaned on the grill, brushed a layer of oil on them, and roasted them slightly over the fire. Controlling the fire, roasting, brushing, flipping, adding ingredients, soon, the chicken wings sizzled and turned golden, and the aroma of hot meat wafted around. "Wow, it smells so good." Daisy was drooling. She could not wait to reach out and grab the hot grilled chicken wings. This barbecue technique. "Mr. Card, have you practiced it before?" Jane was very surprised. She thought she had seen through Kale's identity, but in the process of seeking certification, she was now in a confused state where she could not understand anything. The young man in front of her clearly had a very high level of astronomical knowledge, but he was also proficient in some messy professional knowledge. There was a very heavy veil covering his true face. Even in terms of the starting requirements of a city talent, he had reached the pinnacle of perfection. "No, I just learned a little at the company dinner." Kale chuckled and patted Daisy's little hand that she couldn't help but reach out. He said gently, "Wait a little longer. It's not fully cooked yet." "Good. It's so much better than Jane's. I'm willing to wait for the whole night." Daisy hugged her slender legs and sat down, looking at Kale with a burning gaze. "Then tonight, the barbecue ingredients will all depend on you, Mr. Ka." As Jane spoke, she stared straight into Kale's eyes, only to find that Kale wasn't displeased at all. Instead, he nodded happily and said, "No problem, just leave it to me." "That's great," Daisy said with a smile. She wasn't bothered by SHELD at all. "Well, you don't have to barbecue mine. I'm not hungry." Listening to their conversation, Eric secretly wiped his cold sweat and forced himself to calm down. Among the people here, he was the only one who knew Kale's true identity. This was also the most terrible thing: who would dare to take the opportunity to enjoy the barbecue that symbolized peace? He was afraid that he wouldn't be able to bear it and his life would be shortened. Professor, you said it yourself. Daisy smiled even more happily. This meant that she could eat more tonight. After a while, the first batch of barbecued chicken wings was freshly cooked in the hands of Kale, who had the professional cooking ability card. Daisy picked it up and bit into it without caring about the heat. Jane held 3 chicken wings but didn't eat them. She quietly looked in the direction of Thor in the distance with a hesitant expression. Kyle took in the scene and rolled his eyes. An idea came to him as he smiled and said, "That's right. Right, that big guy had a fight with the SHELD agent. He should be hungry. Someone send him some food." Eric was about to speak but Kale narrowed his eyes and glared at him. Daisy, on the other hand, was enjoying her food and was too lazy to take the initiative to leave. After a few seconds of silence, Jane stood up and picked up the barbecued chicken wings. She whispered, "I'll go. Then I'll have to trouble you." Kale nodded and watched Jane walk towards Thor. He sighed in his heart, "Brother, this is all I can do for you. This is as far as I can help you. You may need some love's help." On the hillside, Thor stared at the starry sky in a daze. No one knew what he was thinking. Suddenly, the barbecued chicken wings on the bamboo skewer were handed to him. "Here." "Thank you," Thor nodded when he saw that it was Jane and accepted the barbecued chicken wings. Jane sat down on the other side of the stone where Thor was. She looked at his weathered face and pretended to be relaxed as she said, "Your Highness, those people from SHELD didn't do anything to you, right? They're just mortals." "Naturally, they can't do anything to me," Thor snorted and looked at Jane in surprise. "You believe that I'm from the divine realm? You've been fighting so hard. If it's not true, then you're a madman, but you're obviously not a madman." Jane and Thor looked at each other. Their eyes met at a close distance, and there was an ambiguous atmosphere that arose spontaneously. Jane blushed slightly and turned her head to avoid his gaze. Thor suddenly pointed to the sky and said, "The divine realm is in that direction, but it's too far away from Earth. There are a few boundary layers between the worlds. You can only return by activating the Bifrost." "Bifrost, is it the mythical thing that can travel through space?" Jane asked longingly. "Of course. But that's not a myth. It's a real thing." Thor's voice was low and weak as he said bitterly, "Unfortunately, I'm already in exile. I probably can't return to the divine realm through the Bifrost." Jane held Thor's hand and cheered him up. "Cheer up. I believe you can do it." "Thank you, Jane. If I can recover my position as a god, I'll definitely take you to the divine realm for a visit." Thor held Jane's slender hand and said sincerely. Their eyes met at a close distance again. The air began to gradually heat up because of the ambiguous feeling, forcing each other's hearts to beat wildly. At this time, Daisy suddenly ran over at an inappropriate time and shouted, "Jane, I have something to do." After seeing the two of them shake hands intimately, she said awkwardly, am I bothering you?" Jane and Thor were slightly stunned. They looked down at their hands that were held together and separated as if they had been electrocuted. They took a step back at the same time. "Don't think too much," Jane said seriously. Yes. I have something to talk to you about." Daisy stepped forward and grabbed Jane's hand. She stuck out her pink tongue at Thor and said, "Uncle, I'll take this room with me first. I'll return it to you later." Thor didn't know how to respond for a moment. He could only scratch his head. "Let's go." Jane's face turned red again. She pulled Daisy and ran away. After putting some distance between them and Kale and Thor, Jane shook off Daisy's tightly hugging arms and asked angrily, "Okay, what's the matter? Why do you have to be so nervous and find a place where there's no one to talk about it?" "There's something I need you to help me with." Daisy took a deep breath, nervously leaned close to Jane's ear and whispered shyly. After listening, Jane had a startled expression as if she couldn't believe her ears. She exclaimed with her mouth wide open, "What did you say? You want to chase the card?" Before she finished speaking, Daisy hurriedly reached out to cover her mouth and choked back the rest of her words. Beside the bonfire in the distance, Cale chewed on a grilled chicken wing and looked at the night sky uninterestedly. He muttered softly, "It's good to be young." Chapter 322. Are you crazy? You've only known him for half a day, and you're already in love with him? We haven't even figured out his identity yet. Jane stared at her best friend with her eyes wide open. Jane and Daisy had been good friends from high school to university. She was very clear about Daisy's character. Although she looked like a social butterfly on the surface, she had never been in a decent relationship. Although Daisy had a carefree temperament, her charming and mature secretary face was still very popular with the opposite sex in school. The boys who chased after her could line up in a basketball court. But Daisy rejected all of them like an ice goddess. In her words, all the other boys are like little brats, animals that think with their lower bodies. It's better to rely on oneself to get a boyfriend than to find one. It's more reliable. When Jane was heartbroken last time, Daisy mocked her fiercely and said that she would not easily fall into a man's trap. But now, she surrendered so quickly and took the initiative to fall into a man's trap. But if it was Mr. Card, it was indeed understandable. After all, no matter how harsh the view was, he was a perfect urban elite that did not exist in reality. Isn't his identity just the person in charge of a company? He was vouched for by your professional mentor. How could he be a liar? In the face of Jane's doubts, Daisy immediately retorted, her beautiful eyes revealing the hazy spring of yearning for love. Jane wanted to persuade a few more words, but seeing Daisy unable to hold back, she could only helplessly spread out her hands and said, "I know, you won't listen to anything I say now. But I still have to remind you that Mr. Card is not someone a little girl like you can deal with. How do you know if you don't try?" Daisy bit her lip lightly, grabbed Jane's arm, and said stubbornly, "Jane, I even accompanied you to this damned place. You must find a way to help me this time. What do you want to do?" Jane sighed and asked, "Don't you have wine in your car?" "We can," Daisy said, and her face could not help but blush. Her perverted words shocked Jane even more. Jane refused decisively. "This is a way to kill 800 enemies but also to harm 1,000 of your own. Absolutely not. Besides, do you think that the professor and Thor don't exist? Then what should we do?" Daisy looked at Jane for help. Jane's heart softened, and she began to teach her one of the few love skills she knew. And so, the two girls who had just graduated from university hid in a corner of the wilderness, secretly discussing the mysteries of life. Beside the campfire in the camp, Cale looked up and inadvertently glanced at Jane and Daisy who were 20 meters away. He quickly retracted his gaze as if nothing had happened and finished the roasted golden chicken wings in his hand one by one. It wasn't that he wanted to eavesdrop, but the problem was that the distance of more than 20 meters was almost equivalent to whispering in his ear with his extraordinarily sharp hearing. Sometimes, having good hearing wasn't a good thing. Cale cursed inwardly. He felt a little bored as he listened to the two girls talk about their plans and schemes. Cough cough. Mr. Card. Eric lowered his voice respectfully and asked Cale, "Today's matter about S-H-E-L-D." Cale understood his meaning before he could finish his sentence. He responded calmly, "It's okay. They won't trouble you anymore in the future. After tomorrow, the equipment that was searched and taken away will be returned by special agents." That's good, that's good. Eric breathed a sigh of relief as the heavy stone in his heart was lifted. He seemed to have noticed something and asked with slight surprise, "Tomorrow?" "Yes, after tomorrow, everything here will become a thing of the past. Our journey should also come to an end." Cale shrugged and inexplicably predicted. Will something big happen tomorrow? Eric clutched his chest and said nervously. You can say that, but it's a fight between gods. It has nothing to do with you. Kale nodded. A fight between gods. Eric swallowed and looked in the direction of Thor not far away. He asked hesitantly with a complicated tone, is that Thor really a god? Kale smiled but didn't say anything. The Thor from the legends? Is his father really the god King Odin? Eric continued to ask. Kale didn't answer, but tacitly agreed with Eric's words. Eric sucked in a breath of cold air after receiving confirmation, my god. Not only did he treat the symbol of peace to lunch, but he also treated Thor to beer. Who would dare believe it? While Eric was still digesting the enormous information, Kale stood up from the mat on the ground and patted him on the shoulder, help me block your 2 students later. I have something to do. Eric shivered and hurriedly said, understood. I'll definitely complete the mission. Relax. Kale waved his hand behind him and walked towards the caravan alone. After entering the back of the caravan, Kale closed the door and leaned against the seat in the enclosed cabin. He nodded and said in a deep voice, Vice, contact Yutong. Yes, Master. The mechanical watch glowed and flashed blue, forming a 3D projection in the air. 5 seconds later, the private communication between the two was connected. The projection revealed Yutong's delicate and soft face. As if she had just gone through a fierce battle, Yutong's forehead was covered in sweat. A few strands of wet black hair stuck to her white face. Her gem-like beautiful eyes still had a cold silver light that hadn't completely dissipated. After connecting with Kale, the cold hostility on Yutong's body immediately dissipated. She softly called out, Boss. Master. After seeing Kale's projection, the carts around Yutong all knelt down on one knee to show their respect. How's the situation over there? Kale asked. It's over. The second symbiotic creature has just been eliminated. Yutong said casually as if she had just killed a little mouse that had intruded into her house. On the side, the carts who were kneeling on one knee shivered. They looked at Yutong's feet with numb scalps. There was a dark red liquid creature's corpse. As the host, the blonde loli was lying on the ground on the other side, safe and sound. Yutong was probably the only person who could forcefully separate the symbiotic creature and the host from their symbiotic state without using ultrasonic waves and fire. Using her powerful mind as a scalpel, she accurately, elegantly, and domineeringly separated the bodies and consciousness of the two. At first, it was enough to make people shudder. Eddie, remember this. Don't ever mess with that woman. Toxin said in Eddie's mind with unprecedented seriousness. Eddie was still sitting on the edge of the battlefield. He said in agreement, nonsense, I'm not that stupid. Well done. As soon as Kale finished his evaluation, Yutong took credit for Luna. Luna did well too. She captured Eddie and the symbiotic creature in his body. I'm her comrade, not a captive. Eddie corrected weakly. Kale pondered for a moment and asked, that symbiotic creature really doesn't have a weakness? From the looks of it, yes. Yutong answered. Okay. Take them back to the Dihao Tower and do a combat test. You can do as you see fit. I'll probably stay in Mexico for another day or so. Once I'm done here, I'll return as soon as possible. Kale didn't think too much and immediately gave the order. Yes, boss. Yutong wanted to talk about Luna's situation, but considering Luna's pride and the serious consequences of boss getting angry, she didn't say anything. Chapter 323. An eventful night had passed. It was 8:00 in the morning, New York time. New York, Emperor Tower. On the third last floor near the top, there was a transparent single isolation room made of unknown materials full of built-in surveillance cameras. The LCD screen inlaid in the middle of the inner wall suddenly lit up and automatically switched to the channel broadcasting the news. The beautiful news anchor with light makeup was reading the news in standard English. This morning. Brooklyn, Inner Alley 654 to 656 Hatta Street, middle of Jiahua Road Branch Road, two groups of unknown people were fighting fiercely. It is suspected that heavy firearms and large amounts of explosives were used. When the local police received the report and arrived at the scene was already empty. The fight affected nearly 10 buildings, and the outer walls of more than 3 buildings were severely damaged. There were also public property such as roads and street lights. Based on the current preliminary assessment, the property damage is about $3 million. Fortunately, there were no casualties involved. No witnesses have been found for the time being. Many of the surveillance records at the scene have been deleted. The fighting group has not been identified yet. The nature of the incident is extremely bad. The local police have temporarily formed a one-on-one investigation team to try to solve the case. The news broadcast was getting louder and louder, so much so that it echoed slightly in the enclosed isolation room. On the opposite side of the screen was a white single bed. Eddie was sleeping soundly on it with his arms and legs spread out. It seemed that the sound of the news broadcast had disturbed him. In his daze, he covered his ears tightly with the quilt in annoyance. "Wake up, Eddie." Suddenly, a hoarse and strange voice seemed to resonate in Eddie's mind and heart. Eddie reflexively jumped up from the bed, half awake and eagerly bowed to the screen, and shouted vaguely, "Okay, I'll deal with these news materials and manuscripts right away." No one responded. The screen suddenly turned off automatically. Perhaps it was because of the good soundproofing, the isolation room returned to its usual silence. "Where am I?" Eddie looked up blankly and looked around. Only then did he realize that he was not in a news company, but in an unfamiliar room made of glass and metal with monotonous colors. "Why am I here in the morning? I should be rushing to work," Eddie muttered as he rubbed the back of his head in pain. At this moment, the eerie voice that sounded like his inner voice continued, "What's wrong? Did you forget everything that happened last night after sleeping? You are poison." Eddie was shocked as the memories from last night flooded into his mind. He opened his eyes wide and said to himself, "Oh right, last night Ghoulie, Blood Prison, K2, and Luna. What happened last night was more than 100 times more than what an ordinary person would experience in their entire life." Not only had his worldview been overturned, even his fate had been forcefully rewritten. Eddie sat back down on the bed and sighed, "Right, my life is completely over." Poison proudly comforted him, "I've discovered that you're pretty good. Last night when you and I were symbiotic partners, we managed to escape death 2 or 3 times. Therefore, I've decided to remove the word temporary from your title as a temporary host. Congratulations, you've been promoted from a spare tire." Eddie didn't buy it as he crossed his arms and exposed it with a sneer, "You don't have a suitable host body right now, so you're trying to blame it on me." Poison was speechless. "Alright, you saved me a few times last night and finally agreed to let me go back to save people. According to the agreement, I'll lend you my body for now." Eddie helplessly spread out his hands. Seeing that there was no sign of anyone in the room, he asked in surprise, "Can you tell me where I am first?" "The headquarters of those people who call themselves K2. It seems to be in a building called D How." Poison replied. "What did you say?" Eddie's eyes lit up as he quickly left the single bed and looked around the isolation room. Poison reminded him in a bad mood, "What are you looking for? It's useless. Those people included me. This isolation room is completely sealed. There isn't even a gap for ventilation." Eddie didn't seem to hear its words as he suppressed his excitement and asked, "Is this really on the upper floor of D How building? Oh my God, this is a paradise that countless reporters want to enter." Poison, after a while, Poison roared angrily, "Come on, we're being held captive in this isolation room. Can you be more serious? Don't worry. Eddie's face was relaxed as he exhaled and said, How building is the property and residence of the symbol of peace. You really think of him as a god? Poison found it difficult to understand. After decades of traveling through the stars, it believed in itself more than in others. If you can end World War II and save the world several times, I can also think of you as a god. Eddie shrugged. Anyone who came to New York City would be subtly influenced to become a hero. This was the charm of the symbol of peace. Humans were weak. Because of this, they worshipped Superman and God, hoping that heroes could turn the tide when the world was in danger and rescue them when they suffered misfortune. Creak, the door of the isolation room suddenly opened and the sound of high heels clicking on the floor came from outside the room. Eddie looked in the direction of the voice and saw an Asian beauty in a long black dress walk in. Her white skin was exposed on her wrists and neck, and her long black hair flowed over her shoulders. Her every movement exuded a suffocating sexiness and pressure. Yutong came to a chair and sat down, holding a document in her hand. Her slender legs were crossed and her shiny black stockings reflected a glimmer of light. She looked up and down at Eddie, who had retreated to the bedside. Eddie's mouth was dry and he swallowed hard. He had to admit that the woman in front of him was the best in the books. She was far more beautiful than the stars on TV who relied on makeup and filters. However, after seeing Yutong's strength last night, he felt that his desire and fantasies had instantly declined. This woman was too dangerous. Toxin roared like a lion and wanted to bite off anyone's head. However, when it saw Yutong, it hid like a cat and didn't dare to make a sound. Is Luna okay? Eddie gathered his courage and asked. Yutong heard the question and was surprised. She nodded and said, She is fine. She is still recovering. That's good. Eddie couldn't hide his joy and said. Why don't you think about your own situation first? Why are you worrying about other people's safety? Yutong asked. I am already in your hands. I can't do anything about it. Eddie said as if he had given up hope. Not bad. You still know what kind of trouble you have caused. Yutong smiled and said, The place where you lived had a street and the roads were damaged. Other than Katu and the symbiotic demons, you have to pay $1 million USD. Eddie could only smile bitterly. Yutong continued, Also, you have been killed in New York City. Your involvement in the murder case has been recorded in the New York and military files. The Daily News Company announced to the public last night that they have terminated your employee contract. Eddie wanted to cry but had no tears. For a normal person, there was almost no future for them. Chapter 324. In the isolation room. Looking at Eddie's lifeless face, Yutong guessed that she had laid the groundwork, so she went straight to the point and said in a firm tone, Eddie. Now there are only 2 paths in front of you. There are 2? Isn't it just one? Jump off the roof and be done with it. Eddie forced a smile and pretended to be relaxed as he teased himself. The second one is tailor-made for you after I considered your situation. Yutong had been waiting for a long time and said softly, The unnatural firm can pay for the $1 million for you. We can completely delete the criminal records of the police and military for you through official channels. We can even eliminate all the bad rumors from the outside world. Stop talking. Eddie's eyes became brighter and brighter. He suddenly interrupted Yutong's words. Under Yutong's surprised gaze, he looked up bitterly and said, Is there any possibility of me refusing? No. Yutong smiled indifferently and answered elegantly and simply. Eddie spread his hands and said, Then it's settled. Tell me your conditions. I don't believe that you'll help me for no reason. You're a smart person. Yutong commented. Because of the symbiotic toxin, she couldn't read the other party's mind at will. She could only lay the groundwork slightly to prevent Eddie from failing the negotiation due to rejection. She didn't expect the other party to be so smart and take the initiative to jump into the prepared trap. Eddie sighed softly and said, "Thank you for the compliment. After all, I'm a reporter who majored in journalism, and I know how to judge the situation. You obviously have me in your grasp, and the difference in status and strength between you and me is so big, and you have something on me. I'm not qualified to take a third path. Then I'll be straightforward." Yutong paused and looked directly at Eddie and said, "The condition is that you join the unnatural firm and become a temporary worker." What? Eddie was a little confused. Was this a forced condition or an online benefit? After all, the unnatural firm never recruited outsiders. Even the receptionists were Family Cal's internal members. If he agreed, he would be the only outsider in the firm. But what the hell was a temporary worker? Eddie asked cautiously, "My major doesn't meet the company's requirements, right? It's still passable. The firm just happens to need an internal media staff to facilitate the release of information to the public. However, what we value more is your combat potential and value." As Yutong spoke, she handed the document in her hand to Eddie and said, "Of course, this temporary contract isn't just for you alone. To be precise, it's for you and the symbiotic entity in your body. You were already prepared." Eddie laughed bitterly and took the document. When he opened it, he found that it was a temporary worker contract. There were nearly 100 clauses below, filling up 10 pages of formal A4 paper. Eddie seriously flipped through it. The more he read, the more his scalp felt numb. When he flipped to the last page, he pressed the contract under his hand and said with a gasp, "What kind of overbearing clause is this?" Not to mention a bunch of restrictions, just the first clause said, "After signing a temporary worker contract with the firm, the contract will be valid for 100 years. During this period, the temporary worker cannot unilaterally terminate the contract. Otherwise, he will have to compensate the firm $10 billion US. There was also clause 56, the temporary worker must obey the orders of the firm's boss. He will work 24 hours a day. If there is a mission that requires him to leave immediately," the last clause was the 101st, "the unnatural firm has the final right to interpret all the terms of the temporary worker contract." What kind of contract is this? It's clearly a slave contract. Eddie was so angry that he couldn't speak. "Eddie, you definitely can't sign this. Look at the bottom of the contract." Poison suddenly said in Eddie's mind. Eddie opened it again and looked. The temporary worker contract was signed by Eddie and the symbiotic demon in his body. In other words, this contract would bind them together and force them to work for the unnatural firm for the rest of their lives. Don't worry. In addition to the terms of the contract, the temporary worker will enjoy all the benefits of the firm's official staff and the Family Cal's Red Stair Card apprentices. Also, we won't force you to commit murder or commit crimes. Yutong said until here and changed the topic, "Also. Letting you sign this contract is not only my idea, but also the boss' idea." Boss? Eddie tilted his head in confusion. "This building, the owner of the unnatural firm." Yutong said softly. "So it's a symbol of peace." Eddie's body trembled. His previous depression and worry disappeared. At least, the legendary symbol of peace wouldn't cheat him, a good citizen of New York City, right? The boss name is really successful. Yutong looked at Eddie's relieved expression and couldn't help but sigh in her heart. This temporary worker contract naturally wasn't made by the boss, but didn't the boss say to let her do as she saw fit? "All right then, I'll sign it." Eddie muttered to himself for a moment and said with determination. Poison couldn't hide it anymore and roared in Eddie's mind, "Eddie, don't drag me into this for yourself. Half of that contract belongs to me. You were the one who insisted on attaching yourself to me. Aren't I you and you me? We're one." Eddie calmly analyzed and said softly, "This isn't just for me. Don't you want to deal with the symbiotic demons and find your own origin and meaning on Earth?" These things are too difficult for just the two of us, but if we can become a member of the unnatural firm and get their help, then both of our goals can be successfully accomplished. You have a point, Poison said with some hesitation. After Eddie and Poison reached an agreement, they signed their names on the paper contract and the electronic contract under Yutong's instructions. Lord God's artificial intelligence directly recorded the files. In this way, Eddie and Poison became the first temporary workers recruited by the unnatural firm. Yutong put away the contract and said with a smile, "From now on, you're one of us. Whether you live or die, you probably won't leave this circle. Let's talk about it after I gather $10 billion in compensation." Eddie nodded. Yutong clapped her hands and a female trainee immediately walked into the isolation room with a suitcase and placed it beside the bed where Eddie was sitting. When the box was opened, there was a black combat suit made of unknown material, an identity card, boots and gloves, a devil mask, a high-tech electronic watch, and 2 injections with the English words super agent and infinite equation. While Eddie was still in a daze, Yutong revealed a devilish smile and said, "So. Temporary Worker 001, your first mission is here." Chapter 325. Dihao Tower, Basement 3. Da-da-da, in the dark underground corridor, the sound of 2 people's footsteps echoed. A female trainee was leading Eddie, who had changed into a black leather suit, deeper into the dark and empty basement. Eddie tugged at his tight-fitting combat suit uncomfortably and followed behind in low spirits. He had been suffering from the constant complaints of the poison. Yutong's mission was still lingering in his ears, the first temporary newbie test mission: find and kill the remaining 2 symbiotic aliens in New York. Time limit, 1 day. It's best if you can complete it before the boss returns. In the end, I still have to face those symbiotic aliens who kill without blinking. Eddie sighed helplessly. Toxin snorted and said, "I told you, that woman is very dangerous, but you just had to follow her wishes and sign the contract. It's too late for regrets now. With our situation, other than working with them, is there any other way to solve it?" Eddie replied in his mind. He shrugged and touched his bulging abdominal muscles as if he felt something. The muscle fibers were tough and elastic, and contained explosive power that could explode at any time. He was surprised by the significant changes in his body in such a short time. Humans have really mastered incredible technology. Toxin could not help but sigh as well. Symbiotically attached to Eddie's body, it had a more intuitive perception and understanding of his body. With its experience across the interstellar universe, it said in disbelief, "The basic injection of the super agent just now made your muscles, bones, hormones, cells, and even genes evolve and transform your body. Overall, your overall strength has increased by about 2.5 times compared to before. Also, the infinite equation injection drug has extended your vitality by a few years. While suppressing the aging factor, it also promotes your body to maintain its best condition. No wonder those trainees could barely withstand our monstrous frontal attack." Eddie had a look of understanding. "Eddie. With your body as the foundation, and my symbiotic armor, those 2 symbiotic aliens are nothing," Toxin said with joy. It had a feeling that as long as it encountered those 2 symbiotic aliens, it might be able to take a step further with the things it was pursuing. "I'm glad that you have such confidence." Eddie was very relaxed. Although joining the unnatural firm had many conditions and restrictions, it could be said that he had seen the light of hope in a hopeless situation. The female student who was walking in front suddenly stopped. Eddie, who was absent-minded, almost bumped into her back. He hurriedly took a step back in embarrassment and steadied himself. Looking around, Eddie was surprised to find that he was in a hidden underground warehouse. There were many car-like objects around him. "Lord God, please turn on the lights." The female card clapped a few times with her bare hands and called out softly. As soon as he finished speaking, the lights in the underground garage suddenly turned on. The abundant light from the ceiling made the spacious underground garage as bright as day. This. Eddie's eyes widened. The underground garage exposed in front of him was more than 1,000 square meters. It was also divided into 3 floors by solid steel shelves. There were various brands of 4-wheeled cars and 2-wheeled motorcycles parked inside. At a glance, it was impossible to count how many there were. This was simply the scene of a super-large luxury car show. These represented the main vehicles of the new era. Cool or monotonous, luxurious or low-key. The different types of steel shells reflected a dim light under the light. Oh my God! Maybach AOL, there are only 5 limited cars in the world. Lamborghini Key, limited to only 1 in the United States. It's actually here. There's also the only limited Ferrari 600 in the world. No matter the type or brand, the vehicles here were obviously limited. The fine and perfect craftsmanship was full of beauty. Eddie's adrenaline shot up. Saliva hung from the corner of his mouth. Cars were no doubt as important to men as to women. This is the personal garage of the head of the Kale family, the female Red 16 said calmly. She was obviously used to Eddie's exaggerated reaction. I didn't expect Mr. Kale. Cough, Boss Kale to be so fond of cars, Eddie said while wiping his saliva. Some of the limited cars here had been snapped up by others before the manufacturers had even released them. Many car lovers could only look at the pictures. They didn't expect that they would be casually parked here and covered in dust. No, these are all gifts. Red 16 spread her hands. Gifts? Eddie's face froze. Yes. Red 16 explained, some of them are gifts from car manufacturers and Stark Industries. Most of them are gifts from Family Cal members. Everyone has one. Eddie was a little doubtful of life. He forced himself to ask, wait, everyone has one? You're saying that the members of Family Cal are all very rich? You can't use very rich to describe them. You should say that they don't lack money. Red 11 looked at him and asked with a smile, although you're only a temporary worker, you're still one of us. Let me ask you, what will you do when you have supernatural powers? Eddie scratched his head and replied, I can't say for sure. I'll probably still look for money, women, power, and enjoy life. This was the pure thought of ordinary people after they became strong. That was why there were many superhumans, but very few heroes. That's right. Red 16 nodded and continued to ask, then what about your youth and lifespan when you have supernatural powers? Eddie was a little surprised. He clenched his fists and said, I understand. Red 16 said proudly, you understand now. In the beginning, you'll get supernatural powers. Then, under the Family Cal's rules, you'll look for things like money, women, power and other vulgar and unavoidable things. But after your lifespan is extended, those things won't satisfy you anymore. You'll return to the pursuit of power and evolution. This is the normal life of every Cal 2 in Family Cal. She paused and continued, of course, power and lifespan were given by the head of the family at the beginning. We're Cal 2 in the dark, but on the surface, we have a different identity in the world. The king of a small country, the president of a big country, the director of a company, the oil tycoon, the leader of an assassin organization, and so on. What kind of family is this? It's an organization. The strongest human organization hidden on Earth. Eddie opened his mouth in shock. That's why, don't ever offend Cal 2, unless you escape from Earth. Red 16 patted Eddie's shoulder sympathetically. It's too late. Eddie pulled a long face. He did offend Cal 2 before. He almost killed 3 Red Stare Cal Tuesday. Red 11 pushed him forward and said, all right, let's cut to the chase. The overseer of Yutong wants you to pick any suitable car you see here. It'll be your transportation when you go out for your mission. Let's go. Yes. Eddie answered with pain and happiness. Chapter 326. Eddie, who had just become a temporary employee of the unnatural firm, officially started to deal with the symbiotic demon invasion in New York City with Toxin. On the other side. Mexico, Old Bridge Town. The night passed peacefully, and the sun rose from the flat horizon of the wilderness as usual. Under the obstruction of her old mentor, Eric, Daisy did not find a chance to make a move on Cale in the end. On the other hand, Jane and Thor, one person and one god, sought comfort from each other, and their relationship heated up like dry firewood. In just half a day, there was a steady trend of them developing into lovers. In this regard, Cale could not help but secretly criticize Odin. Rather than saying that Thor was going to descend to the mortal world to gain experience, it was better to say that he was going to find a little girlfriend on Earth. Odin, the old man, ruled the 9 realms of the universe with the title of King of Gods. He had lived for tens of thousands of years and was very cunning. Any schemes were child's play in his eyes. Except for those who truly cared about Thor and wanted his own son to inherit his throne, no one knew what Odin was thinking and considering. This also caused the son of the ice giant, Loki, to feel a chill in his heart and gradually move towards the completely different positions of Odin and Thor. In the town, in a temporary rented bungalow. After returning from the wilderness with Jane and the others, Cale looked tired as he lay on a chair in the main hall, wearing sunglasses and resting with his eyes closed. Daisy was nowhere to be seen. Jane and Eric, on the other hand, were busy. One of them believed in Thor, while the other believed in Cale. After admitting that Thor came from the divine realm, they pestered him with questions and used the deified rules to fill in some of the gaps in the spacetime theory of Earth's astronomy. Thor answered everything he knew. Although he did not understand the theory of science and technology, he had a more pure and unique understanding of the rules of the universe. Thor had a strong mentality. After several setbacks, he finally accepted his fate and chose to follow his father's orders and continue to be exiled as a human. Cale sighed inwardly as he watched. He didn't know whether to say that Thor had a pure and innocent heart, or that he was too slow and stupid, constantly repeating the trap set by his father and younger brother. Of course. Cale himself felt that he was not qualified to comment. After all, when he first met Thor, he had also set a trap for him. According to the time, they should be here soon, listening to the debate about the spacetime theory in the main hall. Cale, who was sitting on the chair, suddenly looked up. His gaze fell on the clock on the inner wall through his sunglasses. After matching the time in his heart, he nodded slightly. It was difficult for mortals to ascend to the divine realm, but it was easy for gods to descend to the mortal world. This was the incomprehensible and convenient part of the Rainbow Bridge. As Cale pondered, a faint perfumed smell and elegant dark blonde hair wafted in the air. A figure quietly approached from the side. Cale took a closer look and saw that it was Daisy. Daisy bent her curvaceous body and propped her hands on the armrest of the chair. The tube top on her chest was low, and her perky breasts were exposed. Her beautiful eyes shyly stared at Kyle's face, and she had a hesitant expression as if she wanted to say something. Compared to before, Daisy had obviously just dressed up. She, who was youthful, energetic, sexy and charming, simply changed into a short skirt and black stockings. She also put on a dark red lipstick to embellish her lips. Her Western beauty suddenly made people's eyes light up. Master. The other party is not hostile. Her heartbeat has increased by 1 times, and her hormone secretion is abnormal. She wants to mate with you. It was a serious report from the Vice. Through radio waves, it was converted into a frequency that only Cale could hear. Was there a need for special testing and analysis? Anyone who had experienced it would understand at a glance. Cale was a little speechless. He looked at Daisy and deliberately asked coldly, "What's the matter?" "No, no." Daisy shook her head subconsciously. Her hair shook like a rattled drum. Panic and worry were written all over her face. However, she quickly forced herself to calm down. She took a deep breath and bit her lip. Yes. I have something I want to say to you. Jian Yuguang, who was in the main hall, saw this scene and stopped her verbal astronomical theory. She was impressed by her best friend's courage. She clenched her fist and secretly cheered for Daisy. Daisy, come on. Say what's in your heart. Thor, who was beside Jane, also noticed it. He smiled and said, I didn't expect that the two of them are similar to us. Who's the same as you? Jane glared at him angrily, her anger mixed with embarrassment. In the main hall, the only one who was unhappy was Eric. He looked at Jane and then at Daisy. His old face was full of worry. In the end, he sighed and whispered, It's a mess. It's all a mess. What's a mess? Jane looked at Eric in surprise. Eric didn't answer. He only lowered his head and sighed. Kale originally wanted to be cold and let Daisy know the difficulty and back off. However, he didn't expect to make her make up her mind. Daisy covered her chest with one hand. Her beautiful eyes were full of determination. She was about to pour out her burning feelings. Dong, dong, dong. Outside the room's glass door, there was a sound of knocking. It broke the delicate atmosphere in the main hall, choked Daisy's confession, and attracted the attention of everyone in the room. Kale looked out and saw 3 men and a woman. The men were tall and strong, and the woman was bare-chested. They were all wearing medieval war armor or tough leather clothes, holding strange cold weapons such as shields, swords, hammers and so on. They leaned against the glass door. When they saw Thor standing in the main hall, they knocked on the door with ecstasy. Who is it? Daisy covered her mouth in surprise. Eric and Jane were both stunned. A guess flashed through their minds. They were extremely shocked. My men and friends. Saul laughed heartily and hurried forward to open the door. The 4 people outside rushed into the main hall. The bearded man, who was the leader, gave Thor a bear hug. He couldn't hide his joy and said to Jane and the others, We are Khufu and the 3 vanguard divine generals from the divine realm. After that, the divine generals and the other 3 knelt on one knee and said to Thor respectfully, Your Highness, we are here to take you back. Go back? I've been exiled. My experience hasn't ended, so I can't go back to the divine realm, Thor said bitterly. What did you say? Something big has happened in the divine realm. Your father is seriously ill, and the second prince, Loki, has rebelled. You need to go back and take charge of the divine realm. The divine general said excitedly. But, Thor frowned deeply. He had lost his divine power, so he was powerless to do anything. At this moment, a calm voice interrupted the conversation, reverberating in the main hall with a steady and powerful voice. Thor. When did you become so hesitant and weak? Do what you want to do. What's more, it's something you must do. Even if you risk your life, you should do it. Don't give up your bravery just because you suffered some setbacks on Earth. Everyone looked back and saw Kale getting up from his chair. He walked towards Thor as he spoke. His lips curled into a smile as his eyes regained their golden luster. He said indifferently, You're the Thunder God. Chapter 327. Because of Kale's words, everyone in the main hall quieted down and focused their surprised and doubtful gazes on him. Just a moment ago, he was clearly a gentle, elegant, and smooth white-collar talent in the city. In the next moment, Kale's eyes had become sharp. His golden eyes were emotionless and indifferent. His temperament was domineering and direct. Every step he took carried a thick and substantial pressure. Jane, step back first. Who are you? Looking at Kale walking over, Thor's forehead was covered in cold sweat. He vigilantly reached out to protect Jane behind him. He couldn't help but take half a step back from the inexplicable pressure. He felt an indescribable strong pressure from Kale, who no longer hid his strength, as well as a very unique sense of familiarity. Friend? Enemy? He couldn't tell. You still don't recognize me? You've really become a complete mortal, old friend. Kale smiled faintly and reached out to pat Thor's shoulder. Thor originally wanted to dodge, but the reaction of a mortal's body was too slow. He was inevitably patted and staggered back a few steps to cushion the impact. Your Highness. The person from the divine territory, Khufu, was shocked. She was about to protect Thor with her long sword, but was quickly stopped by the other 3 warriors. What are you doing? Khufu was puzzled and looked at the leader of the divine generals. However, the leader of the divine generals didn't answer. His rough face was full of joy as he led the other 2 warriors forward. With the same divine territory etiquette as when they met Thor, the 3 warriors and divine generals once again knelt on one knee in front of Kale under everyone's shocked gazes. The leader of the divine generals said excitedly, "Such rich and exuberant fire divine power, it can't be wrong. Lord Guardian, I didn't expect you to have already met up with His Highness Thor." Lord Guardian? When everyone heard this, they couldn't help but be stunned. They were a little confused about the current situation. What guardian? Our divine territory only has 2 guardians. Thor rubbed his aching shoulder and suddenly froze. His eyes widened as he stared at Kale, who had slapped him. You are, Kale? Earth's human Kale? Who else but me? Kale shrugged and replied very vindicatively, "Next time, don't say that behind my back that I didn't treat you well when you came to Earth. Without me, you would still be locked up in SHELD prison." Ha ha ha, good man. But it's your fault for intentionally hiding your identity. Now that I've become immortal, I can't even sense the divine power of fire on your body. Thor laughed heartily, walking up to Kale and giving him a bear hug. Kale lightly tapped Thor's chest with his finger. His strength was 10 times that of a human's, but it was enough to make the other party retreat in pain as if he had been electrocuted. He waved his hand in disdain and complained, "Go away. Do you and Steve like to do this?" It had to be said that a fierce man needed to be paired with a submissive. For example, Captain America Steve needed to be paired with Winter Soldier Bucky, Thor needed to be paired with Thor the evil god Loki. Jane, Eric, and Daisy saw how the divine territory people bowed to Kale and the conversation between Thor and Kale. "Mr. Card? Kale. Kale? It can't be." Daisy muttered to herself. She covered her bright red lips in shock as if she had been provoked by something. Jane looked at Eric's bitter face and asked angrily in a loud voice, "Teacher, how long are you going to hide this from us?" "Sorry." Eric apologized in front of everyone and then explained, "Obviously, Mr. Kale is Mr. Kale. His true identity is the symbol of peace. I don't need to say more, you all know. I should be the one apologizing." Kale said, 2 days ago, I received orders from Odin himself to secretly take care of Thor who was exiled to Earth. Therefore, I could only use Eric as a middleman to travel with your small team while hiding my identity. We can't afford an apology from a legendary hero." Jane was obviously still angry. She worriedly walked towards the motionless Daisy and hugged her arm. She asked softly, "Daisy, are you okay?" I'm fine." Daisy forced a smile. Her beautiful eyes were filled with despair. There were some things that ended before they even started. If the person she liked was the person in charge of a company, she could try to get close to him through her own efforts by interviewing for a secretary position. But if it was the symbol of peace, the dream lover of her grandmother's generation, the huge gap between them could not be made up through hard work. Thor couldn't help but ask, "Kale, you said that father asked you to secretly take care of me?" Kale nodded and raised his eyebrows. "Other than your father, no one has the honor to make me leave New York City to escort you. 2 days ago, he intentionally exiled you to Earth so that you could train your temperament and find something to become the God King. I see. Father hasn't given up on me yet. Thor's mood was like a roller coaster that suddenly went from hell to heaven. The three heavenly generals, including Kofu, stood up and urgently asked Kael for help, Lord Guardian. Now that the God realm is facing internal strife and foreign invasion, we need your strength. We beg you to return to the God realm with His Highness and help us through this crisis. Kael was pondering when a loud noise suddenly sounded in the sky near the town outside the house. Something's coming. The heavenly general leader's face changed drastically. The group rushed out of the door and looked toward the source of the noise. Half a mile away, a huge hole appeared in the gray sky. With the hole in the sky as the center, a tornado whistled downwards, blowing sand and dust into the air. This unnatural phenomenon not only attracted the townspeople to come out to see, but also the SHELD personnel stationed around the town were alerted. Boom! In the eye of the black tornado, a pitch-black humanoid figure landed perfectly on the ground of the wilderness. Only then did the tornado stop ravaging the land and dissipate. When the SHELD special agent's vehicle arrived at the scene, accompanied by the tornado, a 3-meter-tall steel giant walked out of the crater. It did not have any facial features such as a mouth or a nose. Its face was an empty energy slot, and its limbs and head were made of fine silver metal. Under the sun, it reflected an extremely dangerous chill. After getting out of the special agent's vehicle, Agent Coulson looked at the steel giant and said helplessly, "Sigh, is it another high-tech toy made by the symbol of peace or Stark?" The steel giant did not make a sound. The energy slot on its face gradually lit up, emitting a dazzling light. It aimed at the SHELD vehicle in front of it. Hey, is this a prank from you, Stark?" Coulson twitched the corner of his mouth. What answered him was a blinding red laser beam. The red laser beam swept across the wilderness, and all the vehicles within 10 meters of the steel giant were destroyed. They were destroyed and turned into balls of fire in the big explosion. Coulson was scared but not hurt. He retreated under the protection of a group of special agents. As he walked, he picked up the communicator and shouted, calling headquarters, "There's a steel monster here, requesting backup. Requesting backup." Chapter 328. Old Bridge Town. Under the gray and gloomy sky, the steel giant that descended from the sky broke through the SHELD agent's line of defense and began to move deeper into the town with a target in mind. Laser beams swept across the area. Pedestrians, vehicles, and even buildings could not stop its footsteps at all. Not long after, this Western modern-style town was devastated. Flames raged everywhere, and the residents fled in panic. It was a tragic scene of doomsday. The steel giant chased after its target and walked onto the road. Kael and the others stood at the end of the road. When it saw Thor among them, it could not help but speed up its pace. "It's coming for us." "No, it's coming for you, Your Highness. It must be Loki. He actually sent it to Earth to chase after us." The Divine General Captain's face was very serious. His eyes were filled with shock. He held the giant axe tightly with both hands and watched the steel giant approaching them. "What kind of creature is that? Do you have robots in the divine territory?" Kyle asked in surprise, still maintaining a calm and indifferent expression. Among the crowd, he was like a tourist who had come for a vacation. The Divine General Captain shook his head and said, "No. It's the hidden guard that guards Odin's treasury. It's the treasury's last line of defense. It executes its mission according to the instructions set by the core program. It's usually activated when an enemy breaks into the treasury. Its combat power is definitely not something an ordinary Divine General can match. I know that thing. It's really difficult to deal with." Thor's face was very ugly. If he still had divine power and Thor's hammer, he naturally would not care about a mere mechanical guard. However, he was only a mortal now. His combat power was several times weaker than the weakest of the four from the divine territory, Khufu. He was the same as Jane and the others. He was currently weak and needed protection. Thor seemed to have thought of something. He looked at Kale, who was standing beside him, and said, "Please do it." "Ha ha ha, I almost forgot. We have a guardian here." The divine general captain was slightly stunned. He then laughed without worry. "Indeed, we have a symbol of peace here." Eric smiled as well. Kale's face was expressionless. He looked at the god's domain gate guard, who was already 30 meters away, and said something that made everyone stop laughing. "I won't do anything this time." "What are you talking about, Kale? Only you can deal with that thing now." Thor looked at Kale in confusion. "What about Loki? What if the celestial realm was attacked? And only I can deal with it? Don't forget, you are the future king of God's domain." Kale's rhetorical question left Thor speechless. Kale patted Thor's shoulder lightly and continued, "That wasn't my intention either. It was your father Odin's idea. Since the beginning of the chaos in the divine territory, he told me not to intervene in this matter. I only needed to provide you with some appropriate help when you arrived on Earth. As for the god's domain gate guard and your brother Loki, you need to deal with them yourself." To put it bluntly, from beginning to end, this was a family conflict and internal strife in the divine territory. Odin, Thor, and Loki, the three gods, were in a large-scale confrontation. Of course, it was a wise choice for Loki to hide in the divine territory. If he dares to come to Earth and cause trouble, I don't mind helping you teach him a lesson. After Kale finished speaking, he walked to the side as if he was taking refuge. He put his hands in his trouser pockets and made it clear that he would be a bystander. "Kale, I understand. We will deal with the gate guard. But I still need to trouble you to protect Jane and the others," Thor said in a low voice. After pushing Jane away, he stood in the middle of the road with the three warriors from the divine territory. "No problem." Kale nodded lightly. He pressed his hand down slightly and manipulated the force field to set up a protective shield that enveloped Jane, Daisy, and Eric. At this time, the gate guard was within 10 meters of attack range. The ability slot on his face glowed with a scorching light. Thor and the three warriors dodged to the side respectively. The laser beam missed and landed on the original ground, plowing a deep and terrible scorching trench in front of them. "Your Highness, you retreat first. We will go," the captain of the divine generals shouted. Without waiting for Thor's response, he rushed forward with the other three people holding cold weapons. "You guys!" Thor climbed up from the ground in annoyance. Just a moment ago, even the skin on his arm was scraped on the frosted ground. Red blood flowed down his thick arm. Now, he was the one who was dragging them down. The ability slot on the gate guard's face glowed again. In less than half a second, he shot a red beam at the warriors from the divine territory. "Let me do it!" one of the warriors roared. He carried a shield with both hands and walked at the front. He slammed the shield into the beam. Bang! In the explosion, the shield flew out of his hand. The warrior from the divine territory flew back a dozen meters in the air and crashed into a 3-story bungalow behind him without slowing down. "Don't stop, keep going," the captain of the divine general said coldly. Taking advantage of the time that his teammate had bought, he and the other two warriors successfully broke through to the gate guard. This time, the gate guard didn't shoot a laser beam. Its metal arm bent and whipped, and one of the warriors was sent flying like a fly. Fall. The captain of the divine generals jumped 2 meters in the air and raised his axe. The blade of the axe glowed with a white light enhanced by divine power. He forcefully chopped down on the back of the gate guard's neck. With a crack, 3/4 of the mechanical gate guard's neck was cut off. Its head was almost chopped off. At the same time, the edge of the axe, as a divine weapon, was also bent. Kale, who was watching from the side, thought to himself, could it be that the gate guard's body was made of the black metal, a specialty of the divine territory? Black metal. It was a metal exclusive to the divine territory and the main material for forging divine weapons. It had a very high compatibility with divine power. Kale wanted to forge an eternal divine weapon, and one of the materials needed was the black metal. It's better to be lucky than to look for it. The material came to me on its own. I'll teach Loki a lesson next time. Before Kale could think further, the situation of the battle changed again. Just as the divine general captain heaved a sigh of relief, the back of the guard's neck automatically healed and turned its head 180 degrees. The ability slot was now facing the divine general captain, and the scorching light illuminated his horrified face. The captain of the divine generals couldn't dodge in time. His upper body armor was hit by a laser beam, and he fell to the ground with smoke rising from his charred body. Damn it! The last one, Khufu, let out an angry roar. She pierced the gate guard's chest with her sword, and the tip of the sword protruded from his back. The gate guard seemed to be unharmed. He raised his arm again and slapped Khufu away. At this point, the 4 from the divine territory were all dead. Only Thor was left. He was alone on the opposite side of the gate guard. Thor, don't go. Let's run. Jane held back her tears and shouted. No, Kyle is right. This is something that I should do. It's something that only I can do. Because I am Thor. Thor clenched his fists and rushed toward the gate guard with all his might. Kale wanted to add on for him. For the glory of the northern gods. Chapter 329. On the battlefield on the highway. Although Thor was tall and strong, the difference in physique between him and the mechanical guard was like the difference between a child and an adult. The mechanical guard's combat power was neither strong nor weak in the divine dominion. It was average and could be the gatekeeper of a treasure vault. What's more, Thor was now only slightly stronger than an ordinary person. It was unrealistic for him to defeat a guard that could even defeat a divine general. In the face of such a situation, Thor regained his confidence and fighting spirit. His rough face tightened as he clenched his fists and walked step by step toward the guard who had his back to him as if he was going to die. Thor, don't go over. Inside the protective shield, Jane was on the verge of tears. She looked urgently at Kyle beside her and said in a pleading voice, Mr. Kyle, please help him. If this goes on, he will die. Die? Kale laughed as if he had heard a joke. Do you know how tenacious the deities are? Falling from a height of 10,000 meters is not a serious injury. Exiled to outer space where all life is extinct, they can still survive for a few days without eating or drinking. You mean? Jane's eyes widened. You should trust him. Kale's eyes did not move away from the battlefield. His golden eyes reflected Thor's back. He continued as if he had seen through something. What's more, exiling Thor to Earth was deliberately done by that old man Odin. How could that old man not foresee this situation in advance? Kale was still very afraid of Odin. At least with his current strength and foundation, he could not be compared to the other party who had ruled the 9 realms and lived for millions of years. But one thing was certain. Odin had no hostility toward Earth. He even had a good impression of it. It was like he was happy and cherishing the scenery in his yard. Under the nervous gaze of the crowd, Thor kept approaching the back of the guard. When he was 5 meters away, he finally couldn't help but accelerate. He raised his sandbag-sized fist and aimed at the back of the guard's head. The guard turned his neck slightly and raised his arm as if he sensed something. He didn't even look behind him before he slapped him casually. The aggressive Thor was sent flying back like a fly before his fist landed. He fell to the ground 10 meters away, his body full of wounds and blood. He instantly lost his ability to fight and consciousness and stopped moving. Although it was a little dramatic, this was the cruel truth. A mortal's body was so weak that it couldn't even withstand a single blow. Thor! Jane exclaimed and rushed out of the protective shield. This time, Kale did not dissuade her. Instead, he took the initiative to remove the force field. Jane quickly ran to Thor's side and knelt down. She held Thor's face in her hands and let his back rest on her knees. She anxiously called out in a low voice. Kale did not say anything. Instead, he lowered his head and asked the vice, "How is the test?" An ordinary person would have died after taking that hit. Thor's current physical condition has no signs of life. The vice was in the middle of its feedback when it suddenly stopped and said with deep surprise, "Wait. The signs of life have recovered and are very strong. His heart is beating strongly. There is a hidden mysterious power awakening in the cells of his body." As it said, even Kale could clearly feel that Thor's breath of life in Jane's arms had turned from low to high. It was like nirvana, breaking free from the shackles of death and ushering in a new life. The mysterious power that the vice mentioned was the natural source of power in the Protoss, divine power. "Thor, you're back." Kale smiled faintly. He had already expected this. Odin could not deprive Thor of his divine power. Thor's imprisoned divine power only needed one condition to be triggered, and being on the verge of death obviously met one of the conditions for the trial. At the same time, 50 miles away from Old Bridge Town, the huge crater where the meteorite fell was now the temporary SHELD research department. Hawkeye carried a special bow on his back and stood guard on the second floor of the research department. From time to time, he would look into the crater below and observe the researchers who were performing tests and analysis around the hammer. Suddenly, something unexpected happened. The silver one-handed hammer that even heavy cranes and steel cables couldn't move in the slightest suddenly buzzed and trembled. Even the wilderness that it was attached to began to sway slightly. Then, under everyone's incredulous gaze, the hammer levitated off the ground and broke through the ceiling of the research department. Accompanied by a strong wind, it flew towards the town at supersonic speed. What's going on? Hawkeye looked at the sky in confusion. He could only watch this scene with his eyes wide open. The departure of the extraterrestrial hammer signaled the end of his mission. In just 3 seconds, Thor's hammer had arrived above the town and accurately fell towards Thor, who was lying on the road below. Before Jane could react, Thor opened his eyes. He raised his right hand and grabbed the handle of Thor's hammer. There seemed to be a resonance and connection between Thor and Thor's hammer. The moment they touched, an astonishing divine effect was unleashed. A white light enveloped Thor's hammer-wielding hand. Starting from his wrist, silver metal pieces pieced together bit by bit, and soon, a complete set of Thor's armor was formed. Jane only blinked, and Thor had recovered and stood in front of her, holding Thor's hammer in his right hand. His shoulder-length blonde hair fluttered in the wind. The red cape on the back of the armor was majestic, and his body was surrounded by strong electric arcs. "Your Highness Thor." Not far away, Khufu and the 3 warriors from the divine realm stood up awkwardly. They looked at Thor, who was bathed in divine power and lightning on the battlefield, with respect and ecstasy. On the contrary, Kale sighed softly. He had to admit that the saying, "clothes make the man," was true. Originally, Thor still looked like a homeless man. After putting on the armor and holding the hammer, he looked no different from the original tall and mighty Thor. Another point was that he could no longer bully Thor. After all, Thor had recovered his divine power and a natal artifact. It was hard to say who would win if he fought with him. Kale still liked Thor's previous weak and Shinibu look. Kare seemed to have thought of something. He waved his hand at Thor, who had turned back into the thunder god, and reminded him, "Thor, please be gentle. I need the forging materials on that big guy. Thank you for taking care of me." I will try my best. Thor replied in a deep voice. He turned around and nodded at Jane. Then, he faced the guard and quickly swung Thor's hammer in his hand. When Thor's hammer rotated faster than a certain speed, a strong wind blew and carried Thor into the sky. The guard shot out a laser beam. The scorching red light swept across the sky, but the target of the attack, Thor, flew 100 meters up in the blink of an eye. Thor's hammer was still spinning in his hand, exaggeratedly driving the surrounding airflow. With Thor as the center, a gray tornado with a radius of 10 meters was formed. Dark clouds gathered in the sky above Thor's head. Among them, strange phenomena such as thunder and lightning appeared one after another. Boom! A purple lightning bolt struck down from the sky and hit the spinning Thor's hammer. The electric light increased greatly. I am very angry that you hurt my friend. Thor in the sky snorted coldly. The tornado formed seemed to have its own suction force. It pulled the town's guard out of the ground. Die! Thor roared. He flew down and swung the hammer with his right hand. Thor's hammer was like a falling meteor. It drew a bright arc and hit the guard's chest with a sizzling electric light. Boom! Under Saul's most powerful hammer, the guard's entire metal body was immediately torn apart, turning into countless pieces of varying sizes that flew in all directions. Chapter 330. Swoosh! A light black shadow flew from the bottom to the top of the sky, and in the blink of an eye, it was right in front of Saul, who was 100 meters above the ground. Thor was alerted and raised his hammer instinctively. However, a hand quickly pressed on the hammer handle and ignored the electric current on it, stopping him from attacking. At this moment, Thor finally saw who it was and was surprised. Kale? I told you to go easy on me. Kale shrugged helplessly and flapped his dark wings. He blocked Thor's hammer with one hand and held the other hand with 5 fingers spread open. With the force field's traction ability fully activated, the metal shards that were flying in all directions were pulled back into Kyle's palm by the long line of nothingness before they could even get more than 10 meters away. In less than 3 seconds, a ball made of silver metal fragments appeared in Kale's hand. It was the size of a basketball. The information was displayed as a card. Premium Wuru, multi-refined Wuru metal. Rare blue item card. The original high-quality Wuru metal has been refined multiple times to compress the density of the metal and remove the impurities within. This is the product of the premium metal. Wuru metal is a special metal from the Divine Dominion. It is indestructible and has a melting point of 10,000. It is extremely difficult to refine and has a high compatibility with divine power. It can perfectly amplify and release divine power. Not bad. I can refine the impurities within the material. Looking at the high-quality metal texture of the ball and the hard touch from his fingertips, Kale nodded in satisfaction and kept the rare Wuru metal in the Divine Dominion into the card space. Why do I feel like I'm working for you? Thor pursed his lips and slowly put away Thor's hammer. There's a saying in my hometown, reciprocity demands reciprocity. I'm treating you to a drink. It's only right for you to give me something in return. Kyle clenched his hand into a fist and hammered Saul's chest with all his might. Saul's armor buzzed like a drum. Thor, who was floating in the air, was like a mountain. His divine power was flowing and his aura was strong. Even a human strength that was dozens of times stronger could not shake him. Your strength is all back, Kale said uninterestedly. Of course, what I'm going to do next can't be done without my divine power and strength. Anyway, thank you, Kale. Thor laughed heartily. He held Thor's hammer and looked down at Jane. Then he floated down with his cape. Love between a god and a human. Is this the current trend? It's getting harder and harder for an old man like me to understand. Kale retracted his dark wings and complained. Using the buoyancy provided by the gravity field, he followed Thor and landed on the town's road. Thor and Kale landed on the ground. After the guards and the tornado disappeared, the sky returned to its usual blue sky and white clouds. Golden sunlight broke through the originally dark clouds. Ignoring the enthusiasm of the three warriors, Thor walked quickly to Jane under the disappointed gaze of Khufu from the divine realm. The two hugged and kissed in public as if announcing their relationship. Kale, who had the mentality of an bold man, revealed his true identity. Without the burden of disguise, he stood aside quietly and indifferently. He was a little out of place with the crowd. He had obtained the necessary material for the forging of the eternal artifact, the Wuru metal. This trip was not in vain. He had already found the star ingot in the black market of planet Soccer. The eternal fire had always been in the card space. The only materials left were the branches of the world tree, the blood of the ancient gods, and the alien dwarves who specialized in forging artifacts. That's right. Thor's younger brother, Loki, the magic scepter in his hand seemed to be forged with the branches of the world tree as the main material. When Kale thought of this, far away in the divine realm, Loki, who was sitting on the golden throne in the main hall of the divine palace, shuddered for no reason. That card. A young girl's voice drifted into Kyle's ears, snapping him out of his daze. He turned to look at the source of the voice, only to see the beautiful Daisy with light makeup on. Her fingers were twisted into a ball as she looked at him nervously with a timid expression. With a sudden self-deprecating laugh, Daisy said in a low voice, "Yes. I should call you Mr. Kale. Just call me Kale." Kale looked at her and frowned. "Daisy. Why are you so timid? This is not like you." Daisy was stunned for a moment before she relaxed a lot. She pouted her lips in dissatisfaction and said straightforwardly, "Who asked you to lie?" "I was just too surprised. The person I wanted to confess to was actually a legendary hero or something." Kale was stunned. Daisy chuckled and suddenly turned around. With her back to him, she said, "You don't have to answer me. Anyway, I have confessed, and I won't take it back. If I say what's in my heart, I won't have any regrets in my life. Your life is still long." Kale smiled with relief. This was Daisy's original style, simple and straightforward, natural and unpretentious. Kale thought for a moment and said, "How can I not respond to what you said with courage?" Daisy didn't look back, but her shoulders trembled slightly. From this, it could be seen that she was far from being as casual and indifferent as she appeared. Kale looked up at the vast blue sky above the dome. His line of sight extended to the end of the starry sky. He said softly with deep meaning, "Sorry. My emotions that belong to ordinary people have long been firmly occupied by a woman, half a century ago. You are very outstanding, but it's a pity that you are nearly 70 years late." "I understand." Daisy's voice was trembling. This reason was too cruel. What could defeat the years and fill up the blanks of the past few decades? This was the so-called, "when you were born, I was not born, when I was born, you were already old." Kale said calmly, "But we are already friends. If you have any difficulties in the future, you can come to the Dorset Tower in New York to find me." Of course, of course." As Daisy spoke, she couldn't help but run away. In the meantime, pearl-like liquid dripped onto the road and was quickly evaporated by the hot sun. Kale breathed a sigh of relief. He really wasn't used to dealing with women. It wasn't like dealing with strong enemies and killing people with clear goals. However, at this point, the matter in Mexico could be considered to be completely over. A moment after Thor and Jian Itsuan, the agents of SHELD, arrived one after another. With Kale himself at the scene, naturally everything was peaceful. The turmoil in the divine realm had not been resolved. Thor didn't dare to stay on Earth any longer. He called Khufu and the three divine warriors from the divine realm and went to the wilderness next to the town to summon the Bifrost. After Thor shouted, "Heimdall," several times to the sky, he looked at Kale not far away and said in a low voice, "Kale, aren't you going back to the divine realm with us?" "No. I have to deal with Earth. There are still things on Earth that I need to deal with. Besides, believe in yourself. You can definitely solve those things in the divine realm successfully. Kale said to this point and teased, the next time you come to Earth, maybe you will be His Highness the Divine King. I hope everything is as you say. As Thor finished speaking, the sky above his head suddenly lit up with colorful light. Strands of light fell down, and there was a sense of confusion in space. That was the sign that the Bifrost was about to open. Chapter 331. The atmosphere and white clouds were pushed aside, and the sunlight could not cover the colorful light. The Bifrost penetrated several layers of the world's boundary from the divine realm at the top of the universe. Obviously, Heimdall, who was at the portal of the divine realm, heard Thor's call and quickly opened the Bifrost to the divine realm. Go. Kale, like Jane and the others, waved goodbye to Thor and the others. Thor nodded firmly and led the divine warriors and divine generals of the divine realm to raise Thor's hammer high without looking back. The next moment, a rainbow beam of light fell from the sky and shrouded the figures of Thor and the others. At the same time, a calm and familiar voice came into Kale's ears. Kale said in surprise, Heimdall? It's me. Heimdall responded with a voice transmission. When he opened the rainbow channel and watched the scene on Earth with his clairvoyance, he also used the open Bifrost channel to send a message to Kale. What's the matter? Kale asked. Heimdall quickly said, there's not much time left. Listen, the thing you asked me to check last time, I found a clue not long ago. What did you say? Kale's heart trembled. The thing he asked Heimdall to inquire about was the only thing in the past 6 months. It was also a very important thing. Kale listened carefully. Heimdall said a sentence quickly, just as the Bifrost beam of light flew up and disappeared. Where Thor and the others were originally standing, there was only a circular burn mark left. The Milky Way Alliance? Kale muttered to himself. Heimdall's words still lingered in his ears, about the whereabouts of the 3 humans named Lucy, Howard, and Logan. Master, are we going to find my mother? Venom asked in his mind. Of course, but it's not the time yet. Kale exhaled softly with a complicated look in his eyes. He lowered his head and ordered Vice, who was in the form of a watch, Vice, send a space warship over. I want to return to New York immediately. Yes, Master. Vice obeyed the order and spread out its radio waves. It began to remotely connect with the fighter jets at the Imperial Luxury Building in New York. 10 minutes later. New York, D. Howe Tower, rooftop. Yutong, dressed in a long black dress, leaned on the edge of the railing. Her waist-length black hair fluttered in the wind, and the sunlight shone on her fair and delicate face, reflecting a crystal-clear luster. She was like a blooming black rose, beautiful and moving, but with a fatal danger. The white clouds in the sky shattered one by one as a strong heat flow approached. An ultramodern Eagle space warship left its stealth mode and slowly landed in the center of the rooftop of the Imperial Luxury Building. The silver rear cabin door opened, and Kyle Meteor stepped out of the fighter jet. Boss. Yutong stroked her hair that was slightly messed up by the wind and walked forward with a slight smile. She naturally followed beside Kale and walked side by side with him as they walked down the stairs. How are things in New York? Kale asked as he walked. Everything is going well. Yutong instantly entered her secretary mode and reported her work tirelessly. The temporary worker, Eddie, has found the location of the remaining 2 alien symbiotes. He is rushing alone to the headquarters of the company called Biological Genetic Association. Just in case, I asked Luna and K2 to observe in the dark. I also contacted Natasha and asked her to send us HELD agents to support him at any time. Not bad, but what does temporary worker mean? Kale was a little confused when he heard this. Temporary worker is Yutong mentioned a few key clauses and gave a professional explanation to the temporary worker. It was probably doing the most dirty and tiring work, getting the least benefits and remuneration, and the firm didn't have to take responsibility. Isn't this a bit too tragic? Kale's mouth twitched slightly after listening, and he mourned for Eddie and the symbiotic life form in his body for half a second. Right, back to the symbiotic life form. Kale asked the question that Venom wanted to know the most. The symbiotic life form in Eddie's body really doesn't have the two weaknesses of flame and sound waves? Yutong said with certainty, the combat power of the symbiotic life form named Venom still needs to be observed, but for now, it is completely certain that it is indeed not afraid of flame and ultra-frequency sound waves. That's strange. Kale touched his chin in confusion. A symbiotic life form with no weaknesses was actually born. This was too exaggerated and inexplicable. Even Venom snorted in dissatisfaction. Let's get ready. I want to go to the headquarters of the Biological Genetic Association and see the symbiotic life form with my own eyes. Kale entered the room on the top floor, and Yutong thoughtfully took off his dust-stained coat. Boss, there's no need to be in such a hurry. You just came back from Mexico, and it's already afternoon. You can take a shower and have dinner first. Yutong wrinkled her nose in dissatisfaction. Well, then take a shower and eat first, but be quick. When Kale said expressionlessly, a burning eagerness flashed in his eyes, but it quickly disappeared. But Yutong, who had been paying attention to him, happened to see this scene. Boss, are you leaving again? Yutong's sudden question stunned Kale, and he was silent and didn't answer. You want to leave Earth again? How many years will it take this time, or decades? Yutong asked as slowly as possible. Yutong, how did you know? Kale looked at Yutong in confusion. He asked Vice to keep it a secret for the time being, and he also deliberately hid his mentality and expression. But less than 10 minutes after he came back, Yutong half-read his mind and saw through it. I can't read your mind, but don't think that you can hide it from me. After all, I'm also a woman, and I have a sixth sense. Yutong's mouth curved into a faint smile, and she looked at him proudly. Of course, only in front of Kale would she act like a weak little girl. Please don't hide it from me, okay? Okay. Kale gave in, pursed his lips and said, I received news about Lucy, Logan, and the others. It's been a few days, and they should still be in the Milky Way Alliance's starfield area. I understand. Yutong understood. As one of the people who understood Kale the most, she naturally knew how important her mother Lucy was to Kale. Between Earth and Lucy's safety, Kale would probably choose the latter. Don't worry. If there are no problems in the Divine Realm, I can use the Rainbow Bridge to cross the galaxy directly to the Milky Way Alliance. Once I find them, I'll bring them back immediately. Kale reached out and stroked Yutong's soft hair, and said with a sigh, on the contrary, I'm worried about you guys on Earth. I know. Yutong's slender hand held Kale's big hand, and took the initiative to rub it on her white face. She bit her cherry-like lips and said, It's my fault that I'm too weak, I can't help you get rid of your worries. What's there to be weak about? You're already the Dark Queen among strong women. Kale felt the excellent touch and warmth from his palm, and said inexplicably solemnly, It's mainly the external enemies, how strong they are, it's not something you can predict and guard against. Next, it should be Marvel's famous Battle of New York. This battle would overturn everything. Earth began to connect with the external universe, and from then on, mankind would face the threat of an external enemy invasion, and the world would officially enter a new era. The rise of heroes, alien invasion, and even the descent of gods would emerge one after another. The collision of technology and magic, the duel between divine power and force, the splashing of sparks would be a catastrophe for ordinary people. Finally, with a snap of the finger, all living things would be destroyed. At this moment, mankind simply could not imagine what the future they were about to usher in. Chapter 332. After Kale took a shower in the private room of the Dorset building and enjoyed the Western food under the supervision of Yutong, the whole afternoon had passed and night fell as scheduled. After nightfall, the lights in downtown New York lit up. The streets and buildings were as bright as day. Under the flowing lights, the beauty of technological civilization was fully displayed. It was far more prosperous than the Steel City during the day. Of course, in the night, evil would also be more rampant than during the day. Kale asked Venom to transform into a dark trench coat and put it on. Then, he took Yutong and rushed directly to the area where Luna was. He wanted to personally confirm the combat power of Eddie and the symbiotic demon in his body. Without using any means of transportation, Kale stretched out his dark wings and Yutong used her telepathic ability. The two turned into a stream of light side by side and set off from the balcony on the top floor of the Dorset building. Kale was in mid-air, letting Yutong lead the way while he fell into deep thought. He still couldn't avoid the previous topic. A large-scale invasion in outer space was imminent. Kale wanted to see Family Cal or the New York base to have an additional high-end combat power. Otherwise, as soon as he left the Earth and went to outer space to look for people, the Earth base would be wiped out by aliens. Kale had carefully calculated. At present, there were existences that could face the invasion that ordinary armies couldn't deal with. The New York area had the newly established the Avengers. The current members were Hulk Banner, Iron Man Tony, Captain America Steve, Black Widow Natasha, Falcon Sam, and Hawkeye Clinton. The other was Family Cal, whose secret forces were far stronger than on the surface. The main members were Black Queen Yutong, Polaris Luna, Ghost Rider, and the 36 K2s from Red 1 to Red 36. The K2s were not stationed in New York but were scattered all over the world. Among them, excluding Kale himself, there were already 5 who could be considered as high-end combat power. To be honest, Earth's combat power was now at least twice as strong as it was in the original work. If Eddie could become the 6th person with high-end combat power, then the power he had prepared would definitely shock the alien races that came from afar. The first battle must let the aliens know that the Earth was far from the barren land they knew. Humans were definitely more terrifying than they imagined. "Boss, it's up ahead." Yutong's reminder, which prompted Kale to return to reality. Looking down from the night sky at a height of 300 meters, he could see a large enterprise building area of about 10,000 square meters, located by the quiet riverside near the highway in the city. Not only were there large factories in the area, but there were also aviation rockets and aviation launch towers. However, at this time, the office building collapsed, flames rose everywhere, and thick smoke billowed. The damage caused by the fierce battle was everywhere. Kyle said indifferently as he descended with Yutong. Soon, both of his feet landed on the launch tower at the top of the Enterprise. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. As soon as the two of them landed, a dozen shadows flashed out from the shadows. The K2s moved in unison and approached Kale. They knelt down on one knee and greeted, "Greetings, Family Lord." "Greetings, Watcher." Kale nodded. He glanced at them and asked, "Where is Luna?" The K2s looked at each other. The leader of the K2s, the Crimson One, forced a smile and said, "We are not too sure. The situation here has changed drastically, so." Without waiting for him to say more, 2 humanoid monsters, one big and one small, hugged each other, crashed through the outer wall of a modern building and fell on the open ground below, forming a pit. "What is that?" At first glance, Kale couldn't help but frown. The 2 humanoid monsters were the full-body form of the symbiote. But the larger humanoid monster was too tall and strong. It was a gray giant with a height of 4 meters. Its whole body was covered with tough and ferocious scales and barbs. Its bulging muscles were even thicker than the Hulk's. It was simply a monster among monsters. The small one, on the other hand, was not much different from the full-body form of Venom. On the contrary, whether it was the size or appearance, it was very similar to Venom's symbiote. The two symbiotes in front of him aroused Kale's strong interest. The Crimson One explained, the big one seems to be called Mad Killer. It is one of the alien symbiotes. It is attached to the boss of this biological genetic association, Carlton Drake. Why is it so big? Yutong asked in surprise. The Crimson One replied with a dignified face, because the symbiote attached to Carlton, Mad Killer, swallowed another alien symbiote alive not long ago. Both its size and strength have increased by more than one level. The small one is Eddie, right? Yutong had seen Venom's full body form before. Yes. The Crimson One nodded. While speaking, Mad Killer got up with a violent roar, grabbed Eddie's neck with his palm, and sprinted at an explosive speed close to the speed of sound. Like a chicken, Mad Killer rubbed against the ground, plowing a deep trench on the concrete ground. Eddie's hands grabbed the other party's wrists tightly, trying his best to break free. His feet struggled, the building and the ground were easily shattered like bubbles, but it was still difficult to escape the clutches of Mad Killer for a while. There was a clear gap between the combat power of the two. Venom, what do you think? Kale suddenly asked Venom in his body. Venom was silent for a moment, and then replied as if it was thinking, naturally, the one called Mad Killer is powerful. In terms of pure combat power, it is slightly stronger than me. However, it achieved a strong state by swallowing its own kind. This is not a normal evolutionary growth, but it has gone to a certain extreme. Even its own mind will be affected. Even if I was not born in the same place as them, I still feel disgusted by the fact that they swallowed their own kind. Venom finished talking about Mad Killer in disgust, and when it was Venom's turn, it inexplicably whispered, the symbiote called Venom is strong, it has definitely entered adulthood, but it is absolutely impossible to defeat the current Mad Killer. In addition, I don't know why, but Venom has a very familiar feeling. You noticed it too? Kale narrowed his eyes slightly, his eyes locked on Eddie's body, observing the fine lines on Venom's chest. It looked like the scars left by the flames. Could it be? It can't be. Venom muttered to himself, his voice contained complex emotions. In the battle, Eddie, who was suffering a one-sided beating from Mad Killer, shouted anxiously in his heart, Venom, what else do you have? Hurry up and use it. Before Venom could reply, Mad Killer threw Eddie out while laughing wildly. The powerful high-speed throw made Eddie plunge into a factory building and fly out from the other side of the building. Chapter 333. First, two large hands reached out from the collapsed brick wall, followed by a monster head with white eyes. Then, a strong chest covered in flame patterns appeared, followed by a pair of strong and well-developed dark legs. Eddie stuck out his long scarlet tongue and touched his neck that still had traces of strangulation marks. He was half sitting and half lying on the ruins, panting like a dog. I can't take it anymore, I'm on strike. Eddie groaned in pain and gritted his teeth as he complained, are those K2 people even human? Didn't I just beat up one of their team members last time? How could they just watch me get beaten up and killed? It's coming. Toxin's words were extremely urgent. But obviously, Mad Kill's attack was several times more urgent. Almost as soon as Toxin's words rang out, a large steel cylinder weighing 10 tons crashed down on top of Eddie's head. Eddie's eyes were wide open as he opened his palms to support himself on the ground. He gathered strength at his waist, bent his knees, and kicked forcefully towards the sky. Boom! The steel cylinder with a radius of 2 meters and a length of 5 meters was like a rubber ball. 2 footprints were left on its shell as it was thrown high into the night sky in the opposite direction. When the cylinder flew about 10 meters high, Mad Slaughter suddenly leaped onto it. With a dull sound, the cylinder's flying momentum came to an abrupt stop, and it once again buzzed down at an extremely fast speed. Who can withstand this? Seeing that the shadow was getting bigger and bigger, Eddie used both his hands and feet to try and stop the cylinder that was falling at an extremely fast speed. Boom! The super heavy cylinder fell to the ground at high speed. In just an instant, the ground cracked and the cracks spread out like a net, collapsing into a huge pit with a radius of 5 meters. Debris and dust filled the corner of the Enterprise. Eddie seemed to have been flattened by the cylinder and completely disappeared. Let's see how you can stop me now. Mad Kill stood on top of the steel cylinder like a gray giant and let out a loud and terrifying laugh. But at this moment, the cylinder under its feet trembled slightly, and then slowly and steadily rose a few centimeters. Right below the steel cylinder, which was also the center of the pit. Eddie's dark body sank into the concrete underground, but he still used his 4 limbs to hold on to the cylinder. Blue veins bulged out of his tough muscles. You're actually still alive. Above the cylinder, the maniacal laughter stiffened and vanished. What replaced it was intense anger and killing intent. You bastard, you haven't died yet. How can I fall so quickly? Even though he was in a dangerous situation and at a disadvantage, Eddie still refused to admit his mistake and taunted him back. Very good. Congratulations, you've successfully infuriated me. Mad Killer said as he lightly jumped up and stomped on the cylinder with all his strength. Bang! Even the steel cylinder could not withstand the pressure and let out a ringing sound as it sank. The force was transmitted through the layers of metal, forcing Eddie's strong and powerful limbs to bend. Watch me crush you into a pile of mud. Frenzy laughed loudly and began to repeat his actions. He jumped higher and higher, and with the addition of his body's gravity, he stomped back and forth on the cylinder. The cracks and collapses in the ground continued to spread in all directions and below. Eddie gritted his teeth bitterly and held on. The cylindrical steel cylinder had already been flattened into a pile of scrap metal under the stalemate between the two sides. Eddie said anxiously in a hoarse voice, "Toxin. Think of a way quickly. There's no chance to fight back. If this continues, we'll really be crushed. Hold on a little longer. Let me think about it." Toxin said in a low voice. "I can't hold on any longer." Eddie was almost desperate. His body sank into the concrete below, and his limbs sank into the steel above. It was a bit like a pancake in a double-layered hamburger. He could not move at all except to resist. Why aren't you falling yet? Victory was in his hands. Mad Killer roared angrily. He could not wait to kill Eddie, this human, and the symbiotic traitor in his body. He would return to his home planet on a spaceship and lead thousands of symbiotic demons to invade and occupy Earth. Just as Mad Killer was about to deliver the final blow, the loudspeakers all over the factory suddenly turned on, emitting a strange sharp and harsh sound source. The sound spread like a tide in the cold air, covering the entire large Enterprise area. The frequency of the loudspeaker sound was fine at first, but soon it was artificially adjusted and gradually approached the ultrasonic range. This is... Mad Killer's face changed drastically. A look of horror appeared on his face, and his hands instinctively covered his ears tightly. Despite this, the sound wave still had its own penetrating characteristics. It stimulated and shook Mad Killer's tall and strong body. The muscles full of power gradually turned from solid to a linear liquid state. At this time, on the tower of the launch tower, the sound wave of the loudspeaker had just sounded and was only slightly affected. Kale also reacted and staggered. After Yutong quickly stepped forward to support him, he waved his hand to indicate that he was fine. But Venom had left the cloak form and retreated into his body, shivering. After so many years, the old weakness still can't be changed. Kale laughed. It seems that Luna went to do this. Yutong smiled slightly, referring to the act of using the Enterprise's loudspeaker to send out ultrasonic waves. Yeah. Kale nodded, his eyes flashed, and continued to look down at the battle below, whispering to himself, let me see if it's really like the rumors. Eddie. The turning point is here, now. Venom's voice shouted excitedly in Eddie's mind. Ultrasonic waves not only had no side effects and no harm to it, but it was also an absolute blessing in battle. You don't need to tell me, I know. Eddie responded with difficulty. He could feel the pressure on the cylinder was infinitely weakened. He took a deep breath, his chest bulged like a balloon, and his limbs exploded with the strongest force to push to the side. Pa! Without the suppression of Mad Killer, the cylinder suddenly turned over and rolled dozens of meters away, allowing Eddie in the pit to see the sun again. Eddie quickly got up and looked to the side. He saw Mad Killer, who was previously arrogant and powerful, at this moment, facing the invasion of the ultrasonic waves, curled up on his knees on the ground and wailed miserably. Quick, stop. Stop right now. Mad Killer was in pain and panic. The originally 4-meter-tall giant body was now like a snowman under the sun, melting into liquid at a speed visible to the naked eye, vaguely revealing the male host inside. Seeing Eddie get up, Mad Killer showed an expression of disbelief. How is it possible? How can you be completely fine? Sorry to disappoint you, I'm really fine. Eddie couldn't help but smile. He opened his bloody mouth and put his left hand into it, as if he was groping inside, and quickly took out an object in a plastic bottle. Pinching the bottle cap with his fingers, Eddie, who was on the verge of collapse, tilted the bottle and poured out the brown liquid inside. The liquid drenched Mad Killer's body and filled the air with an extremely unpleasant irritating smell. It was gasoline. What do you want to do? Mad Killer was really panicking now, but under the attack of the sound waves, he couldn't maintain a fully covered combat state, and his body was also soft and couldn't escape the scene. Nothing, I just want to burn you. It's hard for me to specially prepare a funeral for you. Eddie shrugged and spat out a metal lighter from his mouth. Who would hide a bottle of gasoline and a lighter in their stomach in advance? Probably only he, who was also a monster now, would do that. Eddie sighed. Under Mad Killer's desperate gaze, he used the lighter to ignite a faint flame. Chapter 334. I'll have to trouble a creature like you to go to hell. Eddie flicked his finger, and the flaming lighter fell to the ground. It immediately ignited the gasoline on the ground, and in a flash, it turned into a raging flame that spread towards Mad Killer's twisted sinful body. If one said, the ultrasonic waves only had a suppressive effect on the symbiotic body, forcing it to separate from the host and causing it to lose its ability to move. Then, fire, to the symbiotic body, was simply a synonym for death and destruction. Chi. Mad Killer's viscous body, in the form of gray viscous liquid, screamed miserably under the burning flames. There was still a part of its body that stuck to the host, unwilling to let go. The host, Carlton, struggled in the gray liquid swamp, and reached out to Eddie, who was a few meters away. His eyes were filled with the hope of survival, and he begged with fear, "Save me. After this, I'll give you any amount of money. If you had a shred of pity for those homeless experimental subjects, I would naturally save you." Facing the cry for help, Eddie responded coldly, "Unfortunately, you don't. I curse you, you will never have peace in the future, you bloody murderer." Carlton was in despair. As the boss of a technology research company, he began to curse with vicious and vulgar words at the end of his life. Under the merciless devouring of the flames, his voice grew weaker and weaker. Finally, his body and Mad Killer's body were entangled in a ball, becoming a foul-smelling fuel. The flames spread along the gasoline on the ground, forming a partial sea of fire. Eddie was still in the dark form of poisoned symbiotic body, standing motionless in the center. His long and slightly protruding white eyes reflected the light of the flames, and he was completely unaware of the flames that spread to his feet. Poison. I realized that it's much better to not be a human. There's no need to show mercy to these inhumane people, it's best to just bite off their heads. Eddie said with a sinister grin. Evil people would be dealt with by evil people, so persuasion was superfluous. I'm glad that you can understand this principle. Poison's voice rang in Eddie's mind, and then it said seriously, right, don't relax so quickly. I just vaguely felt that there's another living symbiotic body in the company's area. What did you say? Eddie's body and mind were tense. He looked at the surrounding buildings in the sea of fire and asked in a low voice, don't New York only have 4 symbiotic aliens? No matter how we count, we've already finished off 4 of them. How can there still be 1 left? You're asking me, but who am I supposed to ask? As Poison spoke, he suddenly gave out a warning. It's coming this way. Eddie looked up in shock and saw a blurry shadow flashing down, as if someone had jumped into the battle from the top of the launch tower. Coupled with the warning from the Poison, the newcomers were obviously the 5th symbiotic demon and its host. He who strikes first gains the advantage. Before Eddie could see the person clearly, he subconsciously dashed towards the figure in front of him in the firelight. His dark fist waved, creating a strong gust of wind. Eddie, don't. Stop. Protect the Patriarch. As soon as Eddie launched his attack, more than a dozen exclamations sounded from the surroundings. Tap, tap. 2 beautiful figures stepped forward and entered the battle, one on the left and one on the right. They stood in front of the man and opened their palms respectively. Silver light flashed, and their minds formed an air wall that isolated everything. Green mist drifted, and metal objects swarmed forward crazily. Bang! Being attacked by 2 superpowers at the same time, Eddie's arm went numb, and he flew back without any suspense. He took a few steps back before he could stabilize himself. The collision between the monster's fist and the 2 superpowers caused the air to become chaotic, and the air to explode. The sea of fire in the battle was extinguished by the pressure of the air. Eddie swung his arm and looked in front of him in shock. The ones who blocked his attack were his 2 superiors, Luna and Yutong. Behind the 2 beauties, Kale, who was wearing casual clothes, shook his head helplessly. Since when did he need to be protected by the 2 ladies? However, this feeling wasn't bad at all. Be careful, the person behind me has a symbiotic demon in his body, Eddie said quickly with a hoarse voice. Eddie, are you confused? Yutong frowned coldly. Anyone who dared to attack Boss was her enemy for life. Brother, look carefully. Who is the person behind us? Luna reminded him kindly. She still had a good impression of Eddie. Of course, this good impression was limited to comrades who had gone through life and death together. Him? Eddie looked carefully. The iconic silver hair, golden eyes, a handsome young face, a tall and perfect physique, and a sense of oppression that couldn't be concealed by the casual clothes. He is. Boss? Eddie was stunned, and so was the poison in his body. The 5th host of the mysterious symbiotic demon was the symbol of peace? You are Eddie, right? Kale's face was calm as he stepped forward. He walked past Luna and Yutong and approached Eddie. The dark liquid peeled off from the top of his head. Eddie removed his battle form that was completely covered by the poison and returned to the appearance of an ordinary young man. He didn't have the domineering aura he had before. He answered timidly, yes, boss. Can I talk to the symbiotic demon in your body? Kale went straight to the point. Eddie didn't answer immediately. After communicating with the poison in his body telepathically, he nodded carefully and said, yes, you can, but you have to promise not to harm the poison. Although it is also an alien and a symbiotic demon, it is a good person. Hey, you are the good person. Your whole family is good. Feeling that the word good person was purely insulting, the poison immediately swore and revealed its true form. Black liquid flowed out from Eddie's chest and turned into a small black monster head. But when the line of sight met with Kale, the poison fell silent again. Its white eyes showed a strong sense of confusion. You are the poison. Kale narrowed his eyes. They were already within 3 meters. No creature cards appeared, which meant that the symbiotic demon in front of him was not bound by the card space. Yes. The poison nodded obediently. It was so obedient that it surprised Eddie. Kale looked at the poison and threw out a strange question, do you recognize me? What do you mean? Although I have heard of your name many times on Earth, this is the first time I have seen you in person. The poison paused and said doubtfully, but you do give me a strange sense of familiarity. Have you been to Planet Sokka? Planet Sokka? Kale's eyes flashed with understanding. He asked coldly, then do you know Carnage? Carnage? The poison repeated the name. Suddenly, its head felt like it was splitting. It let out a painful hoarse cry. Its white eyes were bloodshot as it stared at Kale. Your name is Kale, and Carnage. What's going on? I seem to have heard these two names a long time ago, but I can't remember. Boss, the poison. Eddie was a lot more nervous. After living with the poison for a few days, he had long regarded the poison as a companion. It's okay. Kale waved his hand, indicating that Eddie should not speak. He reached out and touched the poison's head and said, if you can't remember, then don't think about it. You can just call me boss from now on. I'll also introduce myself to you. Following his words, the dark liquid surged from Kale's face and turned into a dark monster mask. Poison smiled in a friendly manner and said, I am your grandfather. Chapter 335. 3 days later. It has been 3 days since Thor from the Divine Realm went to Mexico to train and the alien symbiote caused trouble in New York. Before the ordinary people found out, the world had returned to its original peaceful state. Only a few people knew that this was the only peaceful days left on Earth. New York, Emperor Tower, top floor office. On the sofa near the balcony, Kale was half lying on the leather seat of the soft sofa, resting with his eyes closed. Yutong was behind him, massaging his shoulders with her delicate hands. Boss, about Eddie, well, I know what you are worried about. Without waiting for Yutong to finish her words, Kyle seemed to know what she wanted to ask. Without opening his eyes, he said indifferently, whether the poison is the offspring of the massacre, or the massacre that erases the past memory. Venom and I are very clear that toxin is completely different from slaughter. Kale said with emotion, besides, slaughter had already killed slaughter. My grudge with Carnage was settled long ago on Soccer Planet. There's no need to extend it to toxin. Then let toxin continue to attach to Eddie? As long as it is obsessed with its origin, maybe one day it will find what it wants to know. Yutong thought and asked. Let's see its choice when the time comes. Kale shook his head and didn't want to worry too much. If he missed a major battle force because he cared about slaughter, then it would be his problem as the behind-the-scenes boss of Earth. What I care about is another thing. Kale opened his eyes, exhaled softly, and said with a complicated look in his eyes. Is it about the Divine Realm? Yutong's lips opened slightly, her fingers moved and kneaded, and gently rubbed Kale's temples to relieve the pressure. Kale nodded and said helplessly, since the day before yesterday, Thor returned to the Divine Realm, there has been no news from the Divine Realm. I called the name Heimdall, but there was no response. Yutong suddenly understood. The Divine Realm wasn't enough to make Kale so agitated. The main thing was that once something happened to the Divine Realm, Earth couldn't use the Bifrost to cross the stars. Without the Bifrost, it was impossible to reach the Milky Way alliance with Earth's current aviation technology. Even if they relied on the Eagle interstellar spaceship, without relative space coordinates, they would probably get lost in the endless outer space of the human world. In this way, it would be even more impossible to find Lucy and the others. There are only 2 reasons for the Divine Realm and Earth to lose contact. Kale pondered and analyzed. First, after Thor returned, the divine realm of Earth was ruled by the second prince, Loki, and blocked all news to Earth. Secondly, Saul successfully took back the power of the divine territory, but the Bifrost, which was the gateway to the divine territory, was damaged. Without the blessing of the Bifrost, even Heimdall would find it difficult to talk to me directly on Earth. What kind of reason do you think it is? Yutong nodded. It should be the latter. I still have a certain amount of confidence in Thor. With him, Loki wouldn't have a chance to turn things around. It was obviously a favorable result, but Kale sighed and said helplessly, the restoration of the Bifrost will take at least 1 or 2 years, and at most 3 or 4 years. I can afford to wait, but Lucy and the others might not be able to hold on. If they leave the Milky Way Alliance during this time, it will be hard to find them. Yutong blinked her beautiful eyes and said softly, no matter what decision you make, I will always support you from behind. Okay, with your words, it's enough. Kale smiled. The remaining hesitation disappeared, and he made a firm decision. He would leave Earth and bring back Lucy, Logan, and Howard. Even if he had to take the risk of wandering the stars, he would not hesitate. But before that, he needed to make some small preparations. Closing his eyes, Kale sank his mind into the card space, where all his cards and foundation were stored. Now the scenery here was far more dazzling than half a year ago. White, green, blue, and purple cards were like countless stars in the night sky, occupying all the space in sight. Since returning to Earth for more than half a year, Kale had not fully mastered the power of the divine power. During that time, he also used many card apprentices to copy and collect various types of ability cards from the world. Therefore, the number of white and green ability cards in the card space was 10 times more than the rest of the cards combined. This was a step closer to the realm of omniscience and omnipotence. On Earth, Kale was confident that except for the old woman Alpha Centauri, no one knew more things than him. Kale's mind moved slightly and moved to the storage card area. His deep gaze fell on the tens of thousands of item cards flashing with blue light. That was the Krypton crystal. The cards were piled up layer by layer. People with trypophobia would have their scalp tingling when they saw it. This was the high-tech energy core that Family Cal's overseas base, the old underground factory, had spent a lot of money and materials for decades to secretly build and accumulate. In order to prevent accidents, Kale had transferred tens of thousands of Krypton to the card space some time ago. He originally wanted to follow the predetermined plan and leave it for the future to build the Iron Man Legion with his nephew Tawny. However, because Tawny's Iron Man armor was still in the stage of improvement, the steel machine could not be mass-produced, so this plan could only be postponed indefinitely for the time being. At the same time, the construction of the Stark New Energy Factory made the annual growth of Krypton energy not so tight. In addition, the Earth would soon be attacked by foreign enemies, and Kale had plans to leave the Earth, so he began to think about the tens of thousands of Krypton that had been stored here. If he didn't use it now, when would he use it? Kale had already made a decision outside, and now he didn't hesitate at all. Facing the cards piled up in front of him, he waved his hand. Selected. Krypton Crystal, X 10,000. Sacrifice the card draw. With a swish, tens of thousands of blue-quality item cards that were shining with blue light and piled up into a dense card mountain disappeared out of thin air, leaving an empty space area. No matter how wealthy Kyle was, he felt as if his heart was being cut by a knife. The materials consumed in the blink of an eye were enough to buy the wealth of the entire New York City. Only the Wakanda Kingdom, which had a gold mine at home, could compare. But soon, Kale adjusted his mentality, and it was replaced by an unprecedented sense of expectation. One must know that this was definitely the largest sacrifice in his life, and it was not divided into 10 or 100 cards, but directly 1,000 cards. It seemed that even the card draw system was a little overwhelmed, and it was silent for about 10 seconds before it finally issued a delayed prompt voice. You have sacrificed Krypton Crystal, X 10,000, draw successful. Congratulations on getting, life-saving card, blue, X 121, life-saving card, purple, X 26. Planetary Engine, X 2, Krypton Baby. Extreme Alloy Steel Knife, X 6, Deadpool Uniform. Kale's eyes widened, and it was difficult to describe in words what kind of scene presented in front of him. Tens of thousands of cards, items, abilities, and creatures, shining with blue and purple light, crazily poured out of the space gap like a school of deep-sea fish. Chapter 336. It was undoubtedly a huge gamble to use up tens of thousands of blue-quality item cards in one go and replace them by sacrificing cards. And the new 1,000 cards were all blue-quality cards with no upper limit. All of them were displayed in front of him, making him unable to blink. Kale held his breath nervously and calmly watched countless cards emerge out of thin air, gradually filling up the originally empty space. This was the real 1,000 consecutive draws, blue quality. When the 1,000 cards were all drawn by the system and suspended in front of Kale, the subtle vibration of the card space finally stopped. Kale took a deep breath. He did not waste half a second on the new blue quality cards or the life-saving cards that he had long been familiar with. Instead, he glanced at most of the cards that were flashing with blue light and fell directly on the top. There was only one card hanging alone at the top of the dome, glowing with a dazzling golden light. Gold quality. It was above the purple quality and second only to the colorless quality. It was extremely rare in the entire universe of the 9 realms. After all, Kale only knew that the quality of the Infinity Stone could reach the colorless level. The divine artifacts of the alien races in this world, such as the Eternal Fire, Thor's Hammer, were all at the gold quality level. Wait. When Kale saw the golden light, he knew that the 1,000 consecutive draws were definitely worth it. But when he took a closer look, he found that the newly drawn gold card was even several times brighter than the golden halo of the Eternal Fire. Could it be that it was a rare card? Gold rare? Kale's eyes were red. He reached out and grabbed the newly drawn gold card in his hand. Trembling, he suppressed his excitement and looked down carefully, not daring to miss any information. After a while, Kale's mental avatar pursed his lips. His face was gloomy and uncertain. He held the gold card tightly, and his heart was already in turmoil. Of course, the ability type was the best, but this time, he had drawn a rare creature card. To be more precise, he had drawn a human, a rare gold-quality alien infant. Kryptonian infant, the orphan of a mysterious and unknown race from an alien dimension. Gold rare creature card. The appearance of the Kryptonians was highly similar to that of the Protoss and the Earthlings. The Kryptonians had an energy reactor in their bodies that could directly absorb the pure energy generated by nuclear fusion, i.e., the stars. Their physique and energy were almost perfectly integrated. The eyes of the Kryptonians could zoom freely within a range of a few microns to thousands of kilometers, allowing them to see everything clearly. Furthermore, he could use his eyes to distinguish electromagnetic waves, see through walls, and receive or release X-rays and heat. The Kryptonians could feel the flow of energy in space. Their bodies were like a super-large radar. Coupled with their ultra-long-range hearing, they could clearly perceive what was happening in every corner of the Earth. As long as there was enough pure energy, the Kryptonians would have an almost limitless body, fast flight, unparalleled strength, iron bones, and extraordinary self-healing. The only weakness, kryptonite. It can weaken Kryptonians. There is no such item in the Marvel Universe. The creature is a young Kryptonian male. It is currently 3 months old and is in good health. It will reach adulthood at the age of 18. As it grows older, it will continue to display various extraordinary talents. Do you wish to summon it? The explanation of the rare golden creature card was very long. The more Kale read, the more shocked he was. When he finished reading, he was speechless. There was only one thought in his mind. The talents of this alien race were too outrageous. How could there be such a freakish race? Hulk and the Norse Protoss were synonymous with the top combat power. But compared with the brainless abilities of the Kryptonians, the difference was like the difference between primitive ape men and modern humans. Kale had thought that the Protoss were the perfect evolution of human deification. But in addition to a lifespan of tens of thousands of years, autonomous divine power, and the ability to control divine artifacts, the Kryptonians were too weak in terms of combat power. The gods would cry if they knew. Of course, the invincible strength of the Kryptonians was purely due to the special geography of the Earth. If it were Soccer or other planets, without sufficient sunlight, the Kryptonians would not be much stronger than ordinary humans. But this was the Earth, a world with sunlight and no kryptonite. In the card space, Kale held the rare golden card in his hand and stared at the baby's face on the card. His mind was racing as he weighed the pros and cons. Even half a century ago, Kale, who was still a rookie, did not show such a fearful expression when he drew the venom, which was difficult to control. But at present, there was no natural enemy on Earth that could compete with adult Kryptonians. Even Kale dared not say that he could deal with adult Kryptonians. Although the card system was limited by the master-servant agreement, the special precedent of the massacre showed that there were loopholes in the card drawing system. His birth will definitely shock the world. Even the gods in heaven will be afraid of him. It was because he was not sure that he could control the Kryptonian baby that Kale was both excited and fearful. He was hesitant to use it. Well, let's take a look at the other cards first. Kale took a deep breath and put aside the distracting thoughts in his mind. His eyes fell on the new purple card. In the 1,000 consecutive draws, in addition to the rare golden card, there were 30 purple cards. Of course, 26 of them were life-enhancing cards that were tasteless but a pity to throw away. Only the other 4 cards made Kale feel a certain sense of anticipation. With a wave of his hand, Kale summoned the 4 purple cards to his hand and looked at them from left to right. Supermassive Planet Engine, ×2, Planet-Level Engine. Purple Item Card. It is the size of a small mountain. Once set up, it cannot be dismantled. It is a planet-level engine built with extremely high-tech technology. It obtains energy from a fusion reactor and accelerates plasma to an extremely high speed through electromagnetic acceleration. This supermassive engine can provide a propulsive force of 1 trillion tons. Gentle reminder: gather 10 supermassive planet engines and let the Earth revolve on its own. Gather 100 supermassive planet engines and let the Earth be launched as an interstellar battleship. Kale's mouth twitched slightly. Moving the Earth? Only Shirlaji's people would do that. Next card. Deadpool's Head, a black box containing Deadpool's head. Purple Item Card. A sealed square black box that was locked. It contained the head of a mutated human called Deadpool. So, was the black box or the head the main point? Did the system categorize the creature's head as an item? Kale could not help but frown. There were too many things to complain about. After looking at it for a while, he still chose the card. Last card. Soul Doppelganger, a mysterious ability of the soul. Purple Ability Card. Split one's soul into 2. The origin of one half is left in the main body, and the other half is transplanted into a suitable creature to act as a second doppelganger. When the soul takes over a creature chosen as a doppelganger, it can only target a young body or a target in a weak state. There is a high possibility of failure. The main body and doppelganger share vision and thoughts, but cannot share life. Warning: the soul of the caster must be strong enough. Splitting will be accompanied by extreme pain. At most, there can be 2 doppelganger. Every time the soul splits, the vitality of the main body will be reduced by half. This card, Kale's heart skipped a beat. Almost instantly, a bold idea uncontrollably appeared in his mind. Chapter 337. In the office on the top floor of D Hao building. Under Yutong's professional and gentle massage, Kale seemed to have fallen asleep, quietly lying on the leather sofa. His handsome face, which was usually as cold as a knife, couldn't help but become a lot gentler. But suddenly, Kale's originally even breathing seemed to be stimulated by something and became slightly rapid. Under Yutong's surprised gaze, Kale suddenly opened his eyes, straightened his upper body, and quickly got up from the sofa. "Boss. What's wrong, did you have a nightmare?" Yutong took a few steps forward and asked nervously. She didn't know that when the mind entered the card space, there was no difference between the outside body and the usual sleeping. Looking at the worry on Yutong's face, Kale couldn't help laughing. He gently shook his head and said, "On the contrary, rather than a nightmare, it's better to say that it's a big surprise." "Huh?" Yutong didn't know what was going on and opened her beautiful eyes wide. Her dark and bright eyes were round, with a little bit of ignorance and playfulness when she was in ancient Tokyo. "How should I tell you?" Kyle stroked his chin and showed a worried look. Yutong smiled and took his arm. She looked at him and said softly, "Boss, I'm not going to give you a chance. If it's something private or something you don't want others to know, you can choose not to say it, including me. Because I'm just your weapon, even if it's 100 years or 1,000 years later." When Yutong said this, her face and eyes were overflowing with unstoppable joy, and an almost abnormal sense of happiness and satisfaction. "Yutong." Kale murmured, and put his hand on Yutong's black hair and gently stroked it. When he picked up the lowly Yutong, it was probably one of the luckiest things in his life. Without thinking more, Kale made a choice in his heart. He looked at Yutong and said calmly, "Well, I'll tell you about my secret. If you say." Lucy allowed Kale to regain his humanity and regain the emotions of a human after experiencing war and slaughter. Yutong, on the other hand, made Kale let go of the wariness and vigilance that he had maintained for many years and exposed some of the things that had been buried in his heart for many years. "That's right, it's about reincarnation, the card drawing system, and the sacrificial card drawing." Other than Kale himself, even Steve, Lucy, Logan, and the others, as well as Venom and Vice, who were his assistants, did not know about these secrets. In the following time, Kale told Yutong a lot of things, from his rebirth in 1944 to the present day in 2009, from the drawing of the super soldier to the new card of the Kryptonian baby. The content was very complicated and the story was very long. Kale was very happy to talk about it. It was like he had unloaded a heavy burden that he had carried for many years and was able to truly integrate into this world of the Marvel Universe. Yutong's head leaned on Kale's shoulder. Her long black hair cascaded down like a waterfall. She listened very docilely and accepted all the incredible content without a trace of doubt. Because as early as half a century ago, from the moment when she was reborn in the Tokyo Underground Research Institute, Yutong had 100% trust in Kale. At the end of the story, Kale not only expressed his strong desire to go out to Earth again, but he also directly told Yutong about his ruthless thoughts in the card space. Yutong grasped the corner of Kale's clothes with both hands and asked worriedly, dividing the soul into two and occupying the body of a creature to create a second clone. "Will this ability cause any substantial harm to your original body?" In Yutong's mind, the only person she cared about was Kale. As for the clone soul occupying the body of a creature, it was an inhumane demonic act that indirectly erased the soul of others. It was not worth considering at all. "Every time I split, half of the original body's lifespan will be consumed. It's a pity. For me, who has the Protoss genes and the life-giving card, it's like having no lifespan at all." Kale smiled faintly. Wasn't it just spending life? After all, what he lacked the most was life. If the second clone is successfully created, then the clone can stay on Earth and the original body can leave Earth without any worries. Even if there are accidents that I can't deal with, the second clone can inform the original body in time. Kale pondered for a moment, and his eyes became brighter and brighter. When he felt that his idea could be implemented, he said thoughtfully, after all, the soul is related to the origin of all creatures. I'm also worried that there will be accidents when creating the second clone. However, if I have the help of a telekinetic ability user like you, the success rate should be greatly increased. Yutong nodded and said firmly, even if it costs me my life, I'll do it. Don't make it sound so scary. I won't do anything that I'm not sure of. Kale smiled and directly pulled out a golden card in front of Yutong and held it between his two fingers. This is the creature card? Yutong stared at the card, and her eyes flashed with silver light as she probed with her telekinesis. That's right. Kale did not hesitate and immediately summoned the creature from the card in his hand. With a flash of golden light, the card disappeared without a trace. In its place was a baby boy wrapped in clothes, and it materialized from illusion into reality. Yutong controlled the baby with her telekinesis and suspended him in mid-air in the room. She then carefully examined him from head to toe from the outside to the inside. She was surprised to find that the 3-month-old baby boy in front of her was sleeping peacefully. There was light golden hair on his head, and his face was as delicate and small as a doll's. He looked like a descendant of a European or American human and did not match the bloodline of an alien from another dimension at all. While Yutong was observing the Kryptonian baby, Kale's gaze also fell on the baby. What made him feel extremely regretful was that although the rare golden ability card of the Kryptonian gene had appeared, it was in the gray unlocked stage and could not be copied to be read. Since he could not draw the card, he could only take the path of creating a clone. If it were me before I was reborn, I might be kind enough to be a superhuman stay-at-home dad. But now, I don't have many moral and emotional constraints. The only truth is to strengthen myself. Kale murmured softly as he looked at the Kryptonian baby's cute little face. His eyes gradually turned cold and cold. Yutong, I'm going to start. No problem. Yutong nodded as she kept the Kryptonian baby suspended in the air with her telekinesis. Then, Soul Clone, activate. Kale took a deep breath and devoted himself to performing the new purple ability with all his might. The next moment, as if Pandora's box had been opened, the office on the top floor suddenly became dark. In the strange atmosphere, a thick black fog lingered and covered the large space in the room. Kale trembled violently. Before he could make a sound, he lost consciousness and fell onto the sofa. His breathing, heartbeat, and all other signs of life disappeared. Before Yutong could exclaim, she saw a white shadow that looked like Kale. It separated from Kale's body and floated in the black fog, revealing a clear outline. That was Kale's soul. You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.